What will you do about the Jews who are living there, over 2 million of them?
We'll ask these people that they have the choice either to live with us peacefully and they would have the same rights as we do
In a Palestine state?
in a Palestine state, or get out of that country if they don't like that situation.
What will you do about the Jews
All
who are
right,
living?
all right, all right. Here we are with still some technical issues, but we're going to go through it. We're going to power through. But there we have it. A lot of these self, well, I hate the word settler. So let's go with invader, squatter, parasites. What are we doing? How honest are we going to be, right? Colonizers, though. I think that's the neutral, perfect description of what it really is. Man, but how succinct. Straight to the point. No BS. Here we are. The one thing that we know for at least historical fact is whenever there is a successful decolonial revolution, all of these colonizers grab their shit and go. Even if there is no legitimate threat to the average or the working class colonizer, even then they run like dogs, with their tails tucked between their legs. Why? Well, it's quite simple, really. They fear equality. They hate equality. Just the mere idea of being on equal footing, no longer oppressing the indigenous population, is unacceptable to them. What it becomes essentially is, for them, it's a white genocide. That's how delusional they are. That's how much power they demand. That if they're not in a system that allows them to benefit from the oppression of natives, they can't stand it. They got to go somewhere else, usually back home. It's much like South Africa. A lot of that racist, white supremacist population ended up going to Israel. Because what do you know, Israel and South Africa, man, they were best buddies. They were learning from each other how to oppress their respective indigenous people. Now, here's the thing. Israel outlasted South Africa because while they had similar projects, the main difference is the colonizers were the minority in South Africa. And while that was the initial case in the Israeli colonial project of the colonization process of Palestine, they were smart enough to realize this and start forcing, encouraging, and manipulating people, European Jews, to settle, colonize Palestine, right? For some, they didn't have to do much. They were just straight up, hey, we're going to colonize this place. Come through. For others, they had to kind of finesse it a little bit. But nonetheless, this whole concern about, oh, what will happen to a colonizer? We know what happens to a colonizer when they can no longer oppress the indigenous population. We know. And what they do is they run. And those that remain learn how to live side by side, equal footing with the indigenous people. But even within that population, there are those, again, as we see in South Africa, who are plotting, who are just waiting to once again grab hold of power. All right, that was on my mind right there, the tip of my tongue. Here's what we're gonna do tonight. RBN, Savvy Sab, Revolutionary Blackout Network, aka the Jimmy Dore leftists, get checked by their father, their cash cow, their leader, Jimmy Dore himself. And that is hilarious. The way they do not have remotely the same energy that they do for others. Because they know where their bread is buttered. They know where the money is coming from. And they know that they cannot upset their, let's be honest, majority white audience. From there, we're going to go into Sacha Baron Cohen, aka Borat. Turns out he's truly a method actor because in his movie The Spy, where he plays a Mossad agent, well, he might not have to. There really wasn't that much acting in that role, I guess. We're going to see his battle with TikTok, with the way that the ADL is trying to suppress Palestinian voices on social media. Because the kids, they're all right. The kids are all right. They're doing great. They're doing a whole lot better than we were. That's for certain. Afterwards, we're going to look at whether or not Candace Owens will return from her maternity leave because she dared to interview Norm Finkelstein, the very same man that Ben Shapiro is dodging. Now, we're very upfront about Norm Finkelstein, how prior to October 7th, he was on that right-wing grift, the anti-woke train, right? So, we also know that he's against BDS because it doesn't recognize Israel. Shameful. He's also a supporter of the two-state solution, which is nonsensical. Two-state solution is just essentially an excuse for Israel to wipe out Palestinians out of that region completely. Because Israel will come up with a pretext to invade, conquer, and decimate this supposed second state of Palestine. He says it himself. He's not pro-Palestinian. He's quote unquote pro-truth. That's cute. So he doesn't support the decolonization of Palestine, the end of the Israeli settler colonial project. And we know this because when he was held at the airport trying to enter Israel, he said himself, quote, "I am not an enemy of Israel, a coward." So everything that he does is, everything that he says in defense of his position for Palestine, let's just be honest what it is. He's upset that Israel's using the Holocaust, what his parents suffering, for a cover to do the same to Palestinians. A more modern method, right? And then we're going to go to an embarrassing so-called debate on Piers Morgan, uncensored. Wow, just a sad showing. But what can you expect from a show that is only allowing Palestinian voices to be on for, the drama, the ratings? Piers Morgan is boring. How many shows has he not lost? How many companies hasn't he been fired from? So him trying to be or righteous, giving a voice to the voiceless, or the both sides, right? It's just for viewers, just for clicks. That's all it is. So yeah, personally, I think, hey, go on there, make your point, use that platform the best you can, and dip out. Dip out, because nothing good is gonna come from posting up and just overstaying your welcome there. Deliver the message and bow out. Anything more than that, you're just looking for attention. You're looking to push your brand. Homeboy last time had an hour-long interview with Piers Morgan, and where was he? At a comedy club. Co- a comedy club? Like, that's the fucking joke there, right? That's the fucking joke right there. That's for his brand. That's for him to sell more tickets. That's not speaking up for Palestinians at that point. You already had an outstanding interview with him. What's this fool's name? Bassem Youssef. First interview, knocked it out of the park. Amazing comedic timing for such a dire and horrific issue. Fucking standing ovation from everyone. But then he double dibs, has an hour-long interview where he becomes the joke, where it's no longer about Palestinians. Now it's about his brand and selling tickets. Nah. So we see the same issue with homeboy who decides to come back, Mohammed Hijab, squaring up with Rabbi Shmuley. Embarrassing. Shmuley has no bottom, right? But Mohammed Hijab, and let me tell you, my homie put me onto him. My homie put me onto this guy. And I like his street work, when he goes out and talks to people, he's very composed for the most part. But this was it was embarrassing. Let's be honest. It was embarrassing because when you're up against somebody like Rabbi Shmuley, the more composed you are, the more censored, fuck, even stoic, the better you come off. Because the guy's a maniac. A maniac. So he decides to get, down and dirty. In the mud, the guts, and the blood, and the beer. As Johnny Cash would say. And that's fine. That's fine. But the issue is that the way that people, especially that tune in to watch Piers Morgan, the way they see it is now you're some like brown extremist. You're this brown guy that can't control himself. And if you're there, not for yourself, mind you, again, the second time he's on, if you're there to represent the Palestinian struggle, to give a voice, it's not about you. It's not about your feelings. It's about delivering the best, most concise, most direct message possible. It's about putting your ego aside. Some of the crap that he brings up, it's embarrassing. You would think he's never been on the mics, never been on screen, has no idea of how the public will receive his words, his message, his attitude, his lack of composure. I wouldn't be this critical if it wasn't the second time he was on. If this wasn't also benefiting him, his image, his character, expanding his audience. Especially because on the side note, and I need to do more research because Loki went on Mohammed Hijab's podcast. And let me tell you, Loki is on another level. Loki's on another level. But the fact that Mohammed Hijab didn't even know about the electronic antifada goes to show to me that he's not really on this issue the way he should be. And that's concerning. But Loki put him on. low-key puts everybody on, yo. Like, when I tell you, I need to watch that like 2 or 3 more times, I'll pull it up. Just we're not gonna go through it, but look at that. Just so you know what I'm talking about. It's right here. Got the But immediately, like Loki just starts dropping all that deep knowledge. None of that surface BS. So I recommend everybody watch it. It's an hour, but it goes by so quick. There's so much information. Shit, I'd be taking notes too. All right. That's just a rundown. And after the Piers Morgan thing, we're going to continue on part 2 of our reading of the PFLPs. Well, the book, essentially. I'm always confused about what to call it. Like, it's not a manuscript. It's not like just a collection of their writings. Part 2, we're going to dive a little bit deeper. Also, I'm going to be able to use one of the sections, I think one of the best sections I've ever read of any fucking book. I'm trying to curse that, but god damn. During the Piers Morgan debate, debacle. So let's dive into it. What the fuck are we waiting for? It's like past midnight. All right. Let's get into it. Let's get into the dirt real quick, the mud, right? Like the trash first. Let's take that out. Listen, if you're getting checked by some old white dude and you're taking it on the chin, I got no fucking respect for you. You deserve no fucking respect. All right. Look at this. I'll do this live because, listen, Sabby Sab is somebody who always demonstrated to be head and shoulders above the rest of the RBN crew. So I was following her for like a minute. I thought she was cool. You know, I've been on her call-in show. We've had like a constructive conversation, and I was very direct, open, and honest about my criticisms of RBN. And she heard them, she took them. You know, the conversation continued. And you try to give people the benefit of the doubt of saying like, "Hey, it's hard to make it on YouTube when all they want to see is just these pathetic white people just spewing the same, unoriginal nonsense, uncritical bullshit." I understand that. But at a certain point, you reach a certain level where you can stand on your own 2 feet and you can hold the people around you equally accountable. And that's something she refuses to do, especially in protecting Jimmy Dore. Because everybody out there at RBN recognizes that's the cash cow. Let's just hear this out. Let's just hear this out for a quick second. Yeah, it's fine.
I want to address the elephant in the room. A lot of us did see you were a part of the team that brought Cornel West over to the Green Party. I think a lot of us got really excited when he was running as a Green because we knew that you guys did have experience running presidential campaigns, and then there's also the ballot access perspective to that as well. And then, as we all know, you were also the one that recommended Peter Dow to work with Cornel West's campaign. Ultimately, though, the decision did come down to Dr. West deciding whether or not to hire Peter. But then later on, we did see that Dr. West decided to leave the Green Party. I talked to him about that. I talked to you about that. Both of you came onto the show to discuss it. And then not too long after that, Peter Dow did decide to resign from the Cornel West campaign. Some people, since the announcement of your presidential campaign, some people are now wondering if your decision to choose Peter Dow to work with Dr. West's campaign was in an effort to sabotage the campaign. Now, this isn't necessarily what I believe, but these are just some of the things that have come my way before this interview. And I want to get your take on that, because the way that the events have unfolded, it does give some people that perspective that, well, maybe this was just to sabotage Dr. West. I want to hear your take on that.
So the facts speak for themselves. I introduced Peter Dow, who's a friend, and has been a friend and collaborator for years with many people in the Green Party. And I introduced him to Dr. West and his team very early in the campaign because I did not want to be a campaign manager, but I felt like we couldn't leave Dr. West without a team. We had persuaded him to come on board and now he didn't have a team. So, I sort of was cornered into being a campaign manager for a while. And I introduced them to Peter because he was one of the few people with experience on a national level who was willing to share that experience with independents and Greens, because people who want to protect their relationship to power don't do that, because you will be blacklisted forever and your career is over the minute you do that. And Peter is one of the few people who has been sharing campaign management skills with Greens for a while. So I thought it was really important for the Wests to know about him. But truth to tell, I did not recommend that Peter take any position in particular or that they even hire him. What I did was introduce him. And so for people to say that like there was some kind of conspiracy that brought him in, that's ridiculous, because it was me that brought him to the Wests. And if you think I'm the Democratic Party, well, heaven help us.
All right. Well, there you go. Personally, for me, yeah, it seems like a fucking inside job. It seems like Cornel West got set up from the jump, but that's on him. That's 100% on him. You have decades upon decades of political experience, maybe not as a politician, but understanding the political process, understanding, the structure of the United States political machine. So every move that he's made is just embarrassing, inexcusable. It's pathetic. Everything he's done from the jump is pathetic. From aligning with the People's Party, from jumping over to the Greens without like just dominating that party and just demanding no, like, well, we need to speed up the process so I can get going. Let's have nominations. Let's get that shit done. Let's knock it out of the way and let's move forward. But here's the thing, regardless of whether that's true or not, whether or not he got set up by putting fucking Peter Dow on his team, who just, as soon as he goes independent, as soon as Dr. West goes independent, loses all the leverage that he could have gotten from the Green Party, what happens? Peter Dow dips out. That's so fucking convenient, isn't it? So convenient. All right. So he dips out. That's suspicious, right? But hey, shit happens. This was, for more or less, a good enough interview. Good enough interview question. Sabby Sab brings that. A level of professionalism that you can't really criticize other than, hey, like, it's a little bit boring. But who am I to say it's boring when here I am most excited about reading this is all just fluff for me. Let's get it out of the way. So what does Jimmy Dore do? What does their boss, Jimmy Dore, the Lord and Savior Jimmy Dore? Look at this. Jimmy Dore says this is not reaching official clown show status. First, she brought on Dow to Cornell's campaign. Then when challenged on hiring him, she said she didn't know much about him, which is true. That was her initial claim. Now she says she's known and worked with Dow for years. And he's also been working with the Green Party for years, while they lost ballot access in 20 states. That's the thing too, if you're kind of bragging and introducing somebody to a potential presidential, candidate for the Green Party, where are the stats? Where are the numbers showing that Dow has been a benefit to your party? Too bad the interviewer let all these obvious contradictions slide right by. Could have been a worthwhile news segment. So Jimmy Dore is upset. No, he's not upset. He's not angry at RBN. He's disappointed. Wow. All right. So what happens? Does RBN come out firing, defending Sabby Sab for what basically was just a milquetoast interview? The question was asked. It was answered. Interview continued. Again, a little bit more teeth would have been appreciated, but it is what it is. That's not who Sabby Sab is. She doesn't bring that energy, at least not for white people, but we'll get into that later. So what happens? Somebody does come out speaking almost out of turn here, but unholy Rome over here. Rome, Rome, Rome. If there's anybody who just, as soon as I hear them start to speak, I need to toss my earbuds, my headphones across the room, because it's always nonsense every single time. Rome. But you know what he is? He's passionate. And I can appreciate that. We should all appreciate that. What does he say? Jimmy, I know you're used to the internet revolving around you, but this isn't about you. I have a question. Why do you go harder against third parties than you do against your Zionist buddy that said to your face that Palestinian people were criminals? You complain about ballot access, but said nothing when Dr. West was part of MPP, your friend's party, with no ballot access. It seems you're just after parties that can actually make a difference. And this is coming from a non voter. I see you. I hope that Rome at least votes in his like local elections, like fucking the board of educators. I don't know, something, please. And this whole flexing about I don't vote. It's just funny to me because it's like it doesn't take much. It really doesn't. Now I'm not talking about like the presidency, right? I'm just talking about your local shit. Things where most people don't show up to vote. But you know who does show up to vote for those things? Old white people. Same type that you're arguing with right here. All right. So not bad. Straight up. Let's be honest. We've been saying it from the jump. When Dr. West was essentially like attacked by Jimmy Dore, like, yo, where was this energy with RFK Jr., who was spewing Zionist genocidal propaganda? We didn't have that energy. Sure, Jimmy Dore did better than the Vanguard boys, Vanguard men. Wow, the way that people are just infantilize these guys. Because sure, their intelligence might be that of children, but we give that excuse to white men all the time in order to dismiss them, and we just lower the bar for them. We're not going to do that here. So the Vanguard guys remain silent in the face of Zionist propaganda when Marianne Williamson was on their show for the fourth time in order to what? To maintain their access to her. At the very least, Jimmy Dore played videos contradicting in his face, contradicting RFK's Zionist propaganda. But that's about it. We didn't see the fire that he had for Marianne or Dr. West. He tried to set up a debate with Max Blumenthal and RFK Jr., but everybody knew from the jump that was never going to happen. I mean, RFK Jr. was hanging out with Dr. Rabbi Shmuley. All right. So what does Jimmy Dore have to say to that? He says, that's not even close to being true. I got him to admit every human rights organization says Israel is an apartheid state. Then show him videos of Israel committing war crimes. Then told him it was a lie that Israel didn't target civilians because I covered it. Yeah, Jimmy Dore is either fucking high or drunk, but here we go. On my show many times when they targeted schools, hospitals, and neighborhoods. I then got him to agree to an interview with Max Blumenthal, who is an expert on the topics. So, thanks for giving me the opportunity to disabuse you of that stupid smear you just repeated. Do better. The way that the way that Jimmy Dore feels comfortable enough, or the way that those in RBN who are all grown ass adults, older than me, and they're like what, like late 30s, early to mid 40s. The way that Jimmy Dore feels comfortable talking down to these guys like he's a disappointed father figure is unsettling at the least, at the very least. What has RBN done? What have they allowed to pass? What have they given a pass to behind the scenes that Jimmy Dore feels this comfortable? Being this dismissive, right? Just punking them in this petty ass way. Well, what does Rome come through with after this? He states, and even if that's true, why does every interview has to be done in your style? It's so much more to talk about. There's so much more to talk about than Peter and Dr. West. Your complaints are valid, by the way, but we definitely don't see that same Jimmy for MPP or Rob. The conversation is about the presidency and Jill. Plus, if you can look past RFK being a literal Zionist, I'm sure you can get over Peter. Both of them have done the IDF dirty work before. So, right? So immediately like tones it down. It just starts toning it down. But points out like the hypocrisy, the double standard. Which, let's be honest, RFK Jr. is just a disgusting Zionist. Unabashed, unashamed, rabid Zionist. But we don't get that same energy. What does Jimmy Dore do in response? That's a horrible way of apologizing for smearing me with lies and slander. That's 2 strikes. I can feel another one coming. Your cash cow, your daddy over there at RBN, Jimmy Dore leftist, Jimmy Dore is upset at y'all. You fucking spoke up a little too loud. See, Jimmy's in charge. Jimmy is your fucking blood, your life source, right? He's the one funneling you with all these right-wing whites to donate to you. To help them feel a little bit less racist. And you guys are all smiles when Jimmy Dore brings you on. Strike 2. Isn't that wild? How a grown-ass man can speak to a group of grown-ass people in this manner? Like if they're little kids? Like he's coaching them? Motherfucker, if a old white fuck speaks to me that man in that manner, in that way? Nah, it's just not gonna happen. You know why? Because I would never allow the relationship, right? The interactions to allow for them to think they could speak to me in that manner. But RBN, all of them have been rolling over for this fuck since day one. So of course this guy's like, hey, strike 2, get in fucking line. Getting checked by Jimmy Dore is insane. Embarrassing. Now that RBN run in and cover this, was Socialist MMA a real badass? Was Compton J really about it? Nope. They didn't speak up. They didn't say shit. Anybody else tries pulling this, tries coming after Sabby Sab like that, anybody else, and it would have been front page, it would have been them going ham. Nothing. Literally, the last thing they did with that featured Jimmy Dore was in a positive light. Right? Giving him credit over here. That was 5 days ago, 4 days ago. Spineless fucks when it comes to them. When it comes to this old white dude, they're spineless as fuck. But they're smart about it. They're making good money off of this. You think socialist MMA, Nick? You think he has a real job? Nah. That motherfucker sits on his ass all day. Just collecting those streamer paychecks. How far will RBN go to avoid criticizing or upsetting their leader, Jimmy Dore? I'll give you an example right here. We've gone over this before. Just a fresh reminder of the type of allies or the standard that these people have when it comes to Jimmy Dore. Mind you, this was 2 months ago. We covered it here. How pathetic it was. Somebody donates their hard-earned money, $1.99, stating my problem with Jimmy Dore is how he shit on trans people. Now, to be very clear, Jimmy Dore does that in order to feed his right-wing white audience. What is the response by RBN? With aligning and cozying up and sucking on the teat of a transphobe? Here it is.
And since I have a hard time seeing it, I'll read them, JB. Could you just go through them? Or if you want to read them, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Media Dream says, my problem with Jimmy Dore is how he shit on trans people. I honestly have a problem with that myself. I'm going to say that Jimmy Dore really disappointed me on that as a gay person. And so, yeah, I'm just laying that out there. I actually think that he should have a conversation, especially with a group of trans people, you know, who may have disagreements and agreements with them in order to really clarify on this issue.
I mean, what the fuck is the problem with what is the real problem with trans people? What the hell?
Hey, credit and props to Rome. Credit and props to Rome. Like I said, I toss my headphones. Jesus. I toss them over whenever I hear him speak. But every now and then he has these moments where I'm like, all right, that's what's up. And that's one of them. And he was the only one that had the guts to speak up. And maybe because he doesn't have the foresight to think about the way that he's potentially fumbling the bag by upsetting their leader, Jimmy Dore. But here we have JB. When confronted with the reality that Jimmy Dore is a transphobe, JB being part of the LGBTQ community, what does he do? He suggests that Jimmy Dore should talk to a group of trans people. As if Jimmy Dore is going to have a group of trans people on his show in front of his audience, get the fuck out. If he's a leftist, why isn't he supporting trans people? Especially as the right wing was just bloodthirsty to go after them. Especially around this time. What kind of allyship is that, JB? For your fellow members of the LGBTQ community? IA? Intersex, asexual, I believe. But you're willing to like bend over backwards to be in the good graces of Jimmy Dore, some old white fuck. And you notice how Sabby just quiet, stay silent. She knows the damage it will do to their channel if Jimmy Dore banishes them, excommunicates them. They know. And now you think, oh, well, maybe they're just super chill, laid back. They don't want any issues with anybody. They don't have that type of energy. Maybe that's why they haven't responded or spoken out. Nah. Let's be very clear. When it's not an old white dude talking shit to them, they got that energy. They have the time. I'll show you right here. When when Black Power Media, and I always tell y'all, like, subscribe, but if you don't, please go like and subscribe to Breakthrough News, Electronic Antifada, and Black Power Media. When Black Power Media made like a little joke about starting beef with somebody, they mentioned how RBN was fed jacketing Renee, one of their newer members, calling her a fed, essentially, a op, right? So you're throwing shots, like serious charges, and Black Power Media is over here like joking around about it, being lighthearted about starting drama, starting beef, jokingly, just to get like, they were literally saying, we're not like those other drama channels that start beef randomly with people, aka like Jimmy Dore, RBN's leader, their cash cow. We don't do that. We're actually here about the news. They're all organizers in one level or another, and they all been doing the work for decades now. What does Sabby Sab? What type of energy does she have for them that she didn't have for Jimmy Dore? Let's check it out.
Basically, what I've seen, it seems like the ringleader is Jared. And now that they have Renee, that's a part of this too. I'm going to tell you, Renee is going to ruin your channel. She's going to ruin your show. I've watched her jump from group to group to group. She's had problems with every group that she's been a part of. And I don't know why people can't peep past this woman's game now. So for the people who were, complaining and saying, oh, they were calling Renee out her name, I'm the one who called Renee the op. I called you the op, Renee, and I blocked you because you are a liar.
A liar.
I've spoken to people in brand new Congress, which you used to be a part of. Obviously, when you were part of MPP, I brought you on to talk about it. I also interviewed Nick Brana and I interviewed Zeneb. I talked to all parties. You were on RBN. You pretend like you weren't. You are a liar. And that is why I blocked you. This girl is very much bad news. And my recommendation to Black Power Media is to get her as far away from your fucking organization as possible. You are almost 50 years old, Renee. You are almost 50 years old. What is wrong with you? You are a mother. You are an educator. Why are you spending your time infiltrating groups and causing problems? And let me tell you something, and you guys know this about me. Typically, I'm the one that'll say, nope, leave it alone, let it go. But this shit has been brewing for a long time, and we have been quiet, and we said, we'll just keep the peace because we didn't want black group going after black group. But for them to blatantly lie and for them to sit there, when I have had Kim on my show. Kim has been on multiple times. Back when I had less than 10,000 subscribers. They've all been on RBN. For them to sit there and pretend like they don't know what we do, that we don't organize, that we're not on the ground, that we didn't start RBN chapters, that we're not doing mutual aid, that we're not building a library. That is not just disingenuous. That is being fucking fake. And I do not take that lightly. And I do not like liars. And I'm not usually the one to raise my voice, but I'm gonna let you know right now. When I'm done with you, it takes a lot for me to say I'm done with you. So when I say I'm done with you, I am done with you. I will never, ever extend my hands again. Ever. Ever. Because I feel some kind of fucking way, goddammit. I feel some kind of fucking way. Don't ever fucking use me. Don't ever do that shit to me again. Ever.
You know what safe and sound.
You think she's ever gonna speak to Jimmy Dore like that, or about Jimmy Dore like that? Fuck no. Nah. They know their place. They know their place in the funnel. Ah, man. Same thing with Harlan's Media, Do Dissidents. They know their place in the funnel. So Sabby Sab, RBN, is never going to bring that energy that they had for Black Power Media to Jimmy Dore. We saw how even Rome kind of toned it down, saying, oh, maybe you're right. Maybe that's all true. They didn't have this type of energy. They didn't have this attitude towards them. Why not? Why is it easier for you to get to this level against actual organizers, actual activists, educators, those contributing to their communities, than some fucking opportunist grifter like Jimmy Dore? Why is that? Well, it's because of the access and the benefits of being aligned with Jimmy Dore, the money and the clicks. You'll never see this type of energy towards Jimmy Dore because they know what's going to happen. Their channel's going to crash. No more white dollars. That's going to be gone. And she brings up all these things that RBN is doing. Those things were never disputed, never questioned by Black Power media. What was them Fed jacketing Renee, and 2, the fact that they're so comfortable aligning with individuals like Jimmy Dore, who are essentially white nationalists. If you understand what white nationalism is, they're fucking buddies with the Boogaloo Boy. The Boogaloo group is literally looking forward to preparing for a second civil war, a race war, essentially, in their eyes. And that's who these people are cool with. That's who they truly align with. Why is it that they had to start all their own organizations and weren't aligning with established radical organizations? Because they need the attention, right? They need to do things their way in order to do exactly this. When proper criticism of their allegiance is brought up, they could throw that all out. Just throw it all at whatever sticks, just throw it out. But never actually, addressing in a coherent manner the criticism. And here's the funny thing. Jimmy Dore was right in this situation. Why didn't Sabby Sab have any hard-hitting follow-up? Why didn't she call out the contradictions of Jill? Initially saying she didn't know Dow like that, and now saying she's known him for years and he's been beneficial to the Green Party. Why not bring that up? Well, because she also has to maintain her access to Jill Stein, the same way she maintains her access to Jimmy Dore. And that's why we haven't heard her fire anything back. Definitely not at this level. We'll never see that. The Jimmy Dore leftists, everybody. Pathetic group. Sad group of people. And I tried giving them a couple of chances to be like, no, they're on top of it. Nah. Pathetic. Though step over trans people to be aligned with Jimmy Dore. They'll attack Black Power media who brought up true constructive criticism, but because they dare to joke around about beef, this is the type of energy they brought. Being disrespectful, just outright disrespectful, not even bringing up critical points. No analysis, right? But we'll never see this type of energy directed at Jimmy Dore. Even Rome had to calm down. But remember, RBN, this is strike 2. Don't disappoint your daddy again. All right. That took a lot longer than I wanted it to. That is wild. I need a timer. I need like a 15-minute timer on this bullshit. All right. Yeah, okay. We'll go in order. So, Borat himself, where is he? Just so we know who we're talking about. This guy. This fucking guy. Shameless motherfucker. This is from the New York Times. Jewish celebrities and influencers confront TikTok executives in private call. TikTok faces escalating accusation that it promotes pro-Palestinian, anti-Israeli content. Quote, shame on you, Sacha Baron Cohen said on the call. Anti-Israeli. Mind you, they didn't say anti-Semitic, at least not now. We'll move it down along. I don't even know who this individual is. Deborah Messing. I got to study up on her for sure. All right. More than a dozen Jewish TikTok creators and celebrities confronted TikTok executives and other employees in a private meeting on Wednesday night, urging them to do more to address the surge of anti Semitism and harassment on the popular video service. Mind you, on the top it said anti Israeli. Now it's anti Semitic. The conflation of the two, anti Zionist, anti Israeli, to anti Semitism is actually Zionist propaganda and in itself anti Semitic by attempting to paint all Jewish people of having some type of allegiance, inherent allegiance to Israel. The meeting, held on a video call for about 90 minutes and joined by more than 30 people in all, included the actors Sacha Baron Cohen, Deborah Messing, and Amy Schumer. Oh, fucking Bill Hader, why were you on Trainwreck? Only reason I watched that movie. All right. It was led by Adam Presser, TikTok's head of operations, and Seth Melnick, its global head of user operations. The executive said they wanted to know more about what the creators were experiencing to improve the app, according to a recording of the meeting obtained by the New York Times. The celebrities and creators described, sometimes with fiery rhetoric, how TikTok's tools do not prevent a flood of comments like, quote, Hitler was right, or, quote, I hope you end up like Anne Frank, under videos posted by them and other Jewish users. Quote, what is happening at TikTok is it is creating the biggest anti-Semitic movement since the Nazis. Mr. Cohen, who does not appear to have an official TikTok account, said early in the call. He criticized the violent imaginary and disinformation. He criticized the imagery and disinformation on the platform, telling Mr. Presser, quote, shame on you, and claiming that TikTok could flip a switch to fix anti-Semitism on its platform. Homie doesn't even have a TikTok. So what does he know? Well, what he knows is the speaking points that the Israeli government essentially handed to him. And you know what's hilarious? You know who has a real problem? A real problem with anti-Semitism on their platform? The apartheid man himself, Elon Musk, who Benjamin Netanyahu had a long ass fucking interview with. And here's the thing. Elon refused. This is prior to October 7th. It's 2 months ago. Refused to say that he would actually combat anti-Semitism on the site because he's a free speech warrior. Now he's changed his tune because now the people doing the alleged anti-Semitism are brown people, not his white homies. But they're after TikTok because all the young kids, damn, I'm getting fucking old. All the young kids are combating Zionist propaganda. So it goes on to say, Mr. Presser and Mr. Milnick of TikTok, who are also Jewish and based in the United States, were largely conciliatory in the meeting. Quote, obviously a lot of what Sacha says, there's truth to that. End quote. Mr. Presser said, referring to Mr. Cohen's remark that social media companies need to take more action. Mr. Presser later said, there was no magic button to address all the concerns. Ending free speech, silencing oppressed voices, that seems to be the go-to for these Zionists. TikTok is urgently trying to push back against escalating claims that it is promoting pro Palestinian, anti Israel content through its powerful feeds. Several Washington lawmakers have renewed their calls to ban the app, which is owned by the Chinese company ByteDance, arguing that Beijing may be influencing the content promoted through the platform's algorithms. Let's be very clear. I try to avoid getting into nitty gritty of the criticism of whether China's socialist or not. Are they still on the path to socialism or not? Because we have this brain rot of Western chauvinism that somehow we think that we know what is best or what steps China should take, despite them going from an impoverished country to arguably the superpower or the second, superpower of the world. But that being said, China, the one criticism that will never stop making and voicing is China's friendly relationship with Israel. Shameless, absolute shameless. So the idea that somehow China is out there spreading anti-Israeli, propaganda is ridiculous. It's the users, it's this younger generation who has and knows how to navigate information. We'll see later on with Norm Finkelstein. He says it himself, you don't need a PhD in Middle Eastern studies to understand that what Israel is doing is a genocide. It's a settler colonial project. Of course it's committing genocide. It's inherent. Continues. Anti-Semitic and Islamophobic hate speech has surged on many online services since the Israel-Hamas war began. That's disgusting. Since Israel's bombing of Palestinians in Gaza began, anti-Semitic content soared more than 919% on X and 28% on Facebook in the month since October 7th, according to the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, great fucking unbiased source for this. A Jewish advocacy group, a Zionist advocacy group. TikTok has gained particular attention because of its ties to China, and its powerful algorithm drives content to 150 million users in the United States. Quote, if you think back to October 7th, the reason why Hamas were able to behead young people and rape women was they were fed images from when they were small kids that led them to hate, Mr. Cohen said in the meeting. He accused TikTok of feeding similarly incendiary content to young people. Oh, you dumb motherfucker. Oh, you Zionist propagandist pig. He's essentially saying that October 7th happened because when when the members of Hamas were children, they were fed images. The same ones on TikTok to learn how to hate Zionists. Not only that, but he makes two false claims. Those that were immediately like that before the end of the day on October 7th, the Zionist settler colonial project was already pushing out the propaganda that there was beheadings and rapes. To this day, over a month out, has provided no evidence for these outrageous claims. And these claims are just made in order to excuse the atrocities that Israel has, does, and will continue to commit against Palestinians. But what's going on with Sacha Baron Cohen? This funny guy. This funny guy here. What's his story? What should we know about him? Why all of a sudden does a comedian have this position and has become a spokesperson for Israel? Well, it's nothing new, really. Here on Mint Press, closer scrutiny reveals how close to state power Sacha Baron Cohen really is. Sacha Sacha Baron Cohen is widely hailed as a comedic genius, using his sheer audacity to mock the absurdity of his targets. The creator of Ali G, Borat, and Bruno has become one of Hollywood's hottest commodities, yet his outrageous stunts often bela his agenda and his own proximity to state power. Baron Cohen is often reluctant to make direct political statements, but a close examination of the comedian's background and views suggests that much of his work is pro Israel, pro Western propaganda masquerading as satire. For example, documents obtained under the Freedom of Information Act show that the Department of Defense was involved in the production of the 2009 mockumentary Bruno, wherein Cohen plays a flamboyantly gay Austrian reporter traveling around the world in his quest to become more heterosexual. Bruno visits a military base in Alabama. The scenes on the base feel rather staged, with the officers setting him up for a glut of witty one liners. The productions company's version of events is that they lied to the National Guard in order to gain filming permission, and that after suspecting the military smelled a rat, they hastily fled the base in their vehicle, with the guards chasing them and yelling at them to stop. The car apparently just made it out in time, squeezing under the rapidly closing front gate, like the iconic escape scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark. Fucking ridiculous. The homies would have been shot down. As to the question of why nobody spotted one of the most well-known comedians in the world playing a character that had been around for a decade, production team said that because of the strict discipline at the base, none of the dozen of recruits Bruno interacted with were allowed to speak freely to their superior officers, meaning they were none the wiser. Right. Not everybody is convinced by this explanation. Tom Seckler, an investigative journalist who analyzes the connection between the Pentagon and Hollywood, commented, quote, if the footage which this is so fucking ridiculous. If the footage was obtained illegally by the production company deceiving the military, which they certainly did, so it certainly was, then it would have been relatively simple matter for the Pentagon to prevent them from using it in the final movie. It's not, a lot of this shit is not complicated. It's very fucking Occam's razor. If they actually did an illegal act in a military base, you think that's actually going to get put out to the world? It's going to get put in theaters? Yeah, no, that's how it works. That's the US government, especially when it comes to the military. That's what they're known for. Very lax. Very, very lax. This raises a question of what sort of concessions they gave the military in order to use the footage, or whether the entire encounter was prescripted from the start. I almost said the military had fucking a consciousness. Bruno was also made with the help of the CIA. In an interview with David Letterman in 2009, Baron Cohen casually stated that the CIA casually stated that a CIA contact had arranged some of the scenes in the movies. Baron Cohen's idea was to interview Al Qaeda or Hezbollah members and show them images of homosexual sex to get their reaction on camera. The agent in question was John Kiriakou, who became a public figure after he blew the whistle on the agency's use of torture in Iraq. He is now an author and radio show host. This idea of attempting to always paint Muslims as rabid homophobes by focusing on the most extreme and fundamentalist characters. If you go to an evangelical, church in the South, they're going to have the same reaction if you suddenly expose them to pornographic images. Hell, do that to those invaders in the West Bank, those Zionists, and see how they treat you. Especially because those motherfuckers are always strapped. Kiriakou told Mint Press that he had advised Baron Cohen that his crazy stunt was, quote, an exceptionally bad idea, end quote. I said, listen, they'll kill you. They'll kill your crew. They'll go out into the streets and kill people who remind them of you. That's how bad this is going to be, end quote. When asked about the national security state's role in shaping pop culture, the former intelligence officer said that it is far more cynical than most people realize, explaining, quote, there is a branch inside the CIA's Office of Public Affairs whose job is solely to work with Hollywood studios. This is something that the FBI has been doing since the 1940s. They'll cooperate and give the red carpet treatment to any Hollywood studio that is willing to make the CIA look good. And you have all these liberals claiming like, oh, no, under communism, state propaganda is rampant. Meanwhile, what do we got here? A whole ass branch dedicated to propagandizing the American public and essentially the rest of the world because, Western influence in media. Since Bruno was filmed, the level of CIA involvement in Hollywood has escalated thanks to the passage of the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act, which legalized the use of government propaganda on the U.S. public. Quote, what that then does is it allows the likes of the CIA to assist Hollywood studios in making pro-CIA films. End quote. Kiriakou explained, noting that many top TV shows and movies, all which show the agency in a good light and perpetrate falsehoods such as torture being an essential part of keeping America safe, are now made with the CIA help. Quote, they can just make up these lies now and just go with it. End quote. He added, the extent to which the government directly manufactures popular culture, however, is far more limited to just one agency. The Department of Defense has been involved in the production of at least 814 movies and 1,133 television shows, including many of the most successful titles and series. Oh, it's a good thing we don't live in a communist dystopian hellscape where the government just brainwashes its citizens. In the end, Bruno's production company did interview someone they claim was a terrorist. In the Letterman interview, Baron Cohen described the man as such 8 times in the space of 3 minutes. However, the person in question, Palestinian grocer and NGO worker Aman Abu Aida, vigorously denied that he was a terrorist at all. He claimed that Baron Cohen had told him the interview would be about his peace activism and that his life and business had been destroyed as a result. Abu Ayyad sued for nearly $100 million. The case was settled for an undisclosed sum in 2012. And you know, he did not pay. Sacha Baron Cohen did not come out of his pocket. It is a sort of casual demonization of Arabs and Muslims that has led to much criticism of Baron Cohen's work as an anti-racist on a superficial level, but perpetrating gross stereotypes and contempt for the people of Western Asia. Sina Ramani, an academic and host of the East is a Podcast, a show about Orientalism and popular culture, was especially critical of Baron Cohen's casual racism and how it was used to bluster Western objectivism in the Middle East. Western objectives in the Middle East. Telling Mint Press, quote, this isn't rocket science. He, referring to Baron Cohen, very likely has some connections, and that's how he gets all this amazing access, only to claim to be some kind of Andy Kaufman-esque genius. While a lot of people fall for this, underneath it is all just your run-of-the-mill white supremacist race play. That was a tongue twister. While a lot of people fall for this, underneath it is all just your run-of-the-mill white supremacist race play. If this seems critical, then consider the director. Baron Cohen's 2012 satire of Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. The timing of the production could hardly be any more conspicuous. Conspicuous? There we go. And useful for the US and Israel interests. Written and filmed at exactly the same time as NATO was working with jihadists to overthrow the leader that had constantly been a thorn on the West side. The movie features some of the crudest Islamophobic stereotypes seen anywhere on television. Muslims are presented as interested only in killing Americans or molesting women, while the dictator himself is working on developing nuclear weapons to use against Israel. That movie was just trash in general, but like all this is like spot on. Like it was a propaganda film the same way that The Interview was a CIA propaganda film. The director was released just after the real-life Gaddafi was publicly executed by Western-backed jihadists who control the country to this day and have turned it into a failed state, replete with an open-air slave markets. Romani was highly critical of the movie, telling Mint Press, "The director is essentially an Israeli-American imitation of a Jesus, okay. The dictator is essentially an Israeli American imitation of a crass stereotype borrowed almost directly from the low budget action military movies that proliferated throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Ultimately, it comes down to a very profound cultural Islamophobia, which can be turned on and off as needed. And those deeply radicalized sentiments build up over time and crystallize as foreign policy through invasion and regime change wars." So this guy is essentially doing CIA Israeli propaganda in his films. In his early life, it says, even from an early age, Sacha was reportedly obsessed with the Jewish state. Quote, "He was very Zionist, very involved in Habo," recalled one friend, referring to Habonim Dore, a leftist wing Zionist group of which he was a member. Others remembered him as a very nerdy, very funny, Israel-oriented guy who went to live on a kibbutz in his youth. Oh yeah, this guy's a fucking Zionist through and through. See, a lot of leftists love the idea of kibbutz, right? Noam Chomsky, the Vanguard guys. All a kibbutz is the equivalent, the equivalent of when Protestants had their settlements. That's all it is. But they try to cover it with this veneer of socialism. It's disgusting. He appears to idolize Shimon Peres, traveling to meet him in 2012 and sharing quotes from the former Israeli president on his social media accounts. Peres, of course, oversaw the genocide of the Palestinians in 1948, attempted to sell nuclear weapons to apartheid South Africa, and carried out the ethnic cleansing of the Galilee region. This is where I got kind of suspicious of Sacha Baron Cohen years ago with this series The Spy. I was like, all right, this is a little too much. And I'm going to be honest with y'all. One of my favorite films, growing up was Munich, which is a fucking like as pro-Zionist as you can get. It was well acted, is from what I remember, like the pacing, the thriller aspect of it, like very Mission Impossible-esque. But I was grown. 2019, The Spy comes out, and I was like, nah, this is straight up propaganda, isn't it? So here we go. The pro-Israel propaganda was turned up to 11, however, in The Spy. The 2019 miniseries drama Baron Cohen produced himself and played the title character. This guy's like living the fantasy of being an Israeli fucking agent. Well, one out in the field publicly. Not a propagandist. Directed by former IDF paratrooper Gideon Ralph, The Spy lionizes Mossad agent Eli Cohen, who goes deep undercover, embedded himself in Syrian high society, providing intelligence to the Jewish state, crucial for its victory in the 1967 Six-Day War against its neighbors. To this day, Israel illegally occupies Syrian and Palestinian land captured in 1967. The series is a relentless celebration of Mossad and Israel, contrasting them with the barbarity of their neighbors. As the Daily Dot's review of the show commented, the overriding message was, quote, Cohen good, Syrians evil, end quote. The Washington Post also noted that, quote, the spy was a central part of a wider Mossad recruitment drive. Eli Cohen was a real historical figure and a hero to many of the most passionate Zionists. Sacha remarked that he sees himself in Eli and claimed that what they do is rather similar. They're both soldiers for Israel. But yeah, I recommend you reading this article. They dive into how he's never critical of Israel. Yeah, but more of these lefty Zionists is what we need to normalize. I bet him and Ethan Klein would have a fucking great time. And Hassan Piker would love to have him on his show for more clicks, for more clout, to increase his, the size of his pockets. Having such a big star with him. This is the type of guy that Sam Cedar would hang out with. I mean, he does with Sarah Silverman, another Zionist, so why not? All right. Let's go with Candace Owens. I'm telling you, she might not come back from her maternity leave. She might not come back. Because there's no way that just a rabid Zionist like Ben Shapiro is going to just allow this to go unpunished, daring to have Norm Finkelstein on. Because they've been beefing it online, Candace and Ben Shapiro. I wouldn't be surprised if they pushed her out or offered her a, compensation package to depart from the company. Ben Shapiro has a lot of pull in that. I think he's one of the co-founders. All right. Let's see what we got. What's going on here. Remember, we see this with a critical eye towards Norm Finkelstein's crusade, anti-woke crusade, as well as his attacks against BDS and his support for the imaginary solution of, two states. So what does he have to say here?
And what brought you to, as a person who was raised by concentration camp survivors, to the pro-Palestinian side?
Well, I don't want to quibble over terminology, but sometimes if the terminology is wrong at the outset, then it confuses things moving forward. I'm not pro-Palestinian. I'm not pro-Israeli. I'm pro-truth, and I'm pro-justice. If the truth is on the Israeli side, I will support Israel. If justice is on the Israeli side, I'll support Israel. And the same thing goes for the Palestinians. I've spent the greater part of my adult life.
Just to be clear here, he makes that distinction to seem more neutral or whatever the case. But we have to recognize that distinction as saying he does not support Palestinian liberation completely. Meaning he does not support the decolonization process of Palestine, ridding Palestine from its settler colonial occupants. So he is not pro-Palestinian in more than one regard.
You can say beginning 1982, so it's more than 4 decades, researching, studying the Israel-Palestine conflict. And it's my conclusion at the end of that research, but already early on, that the case that Israel makes for its crimes are in large part fabrications, misrepresentations, and distortions. And on the other hand, the Palestinian case is very strongly supported by the evidence. And when I speak about evidence, I'm not talking about what Hamas says any more than when I speak about Israel. I care much about what the government says. If you're serious about these sorts of things, the first thing you do is you try to search out sources which have a certain amount of credibility. So when it comes to the Israel-Palestine conflict, let's say the human rights dimension, you look at what respected human rights organizations have to say. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the B'Tselem, the main Israeli Information Center for the occupied territories. You look at what the evidence shows, not based on biased sources or naturally biased sources, but on the available evidence. And I tried to be a strict adherent of the two principles of truth and justice. And that's where I landed. And I think that's frankly where most of the world has landed. And it's also, incidentally, but not trivially, it's where a large part of the young Jewish population has landed. If you go to the demonstrations now, the ones that have garnered the headlines, say the one in Grand Central Station, was overwhelmingly Jewish. It was organized by Jewish organizations. Young people, mostly, but not entirely. The Statue of Liberty demonstration, again, it was Jewish young people who organized the demonstration. So this idea that it's somehow polarized ethnically is belied by the facts. Now, I will wholeheartedly.
Let's make something very clear. Because Norm does this a lot, this kind of white savior complex. Again, I don't think he does any of this in defense of Palestinians. I think he does it out of spite that the Israeli project uses the Holocaust as a shield for its atrocities, which enrages him because of the suffering, and justifiably so, the suffering, that rage is justified towards the exploitation of the suffering of his parents during the Holocaust. They were both survivors whose entire families were exterminated. So that's understandable to be upset at Israel for besmirching their name, for tarnishing their legacy, for weaponizing their oppression. But I don't think he does it because he actually cares about Palestinians. Nothing that I've seen conveys that. And that's why he doesn't call for the decolonization of Palestine. And these groups that he's trying to, promote and give credit to, accurately proving the point that it's a contested issue amongst Jewish people, the Zionism that is in the Israeli project. Those groups are not supporting Palestinian liberation by any means necessary. Those groups are often just calling for a ceasefire and wanting to return to a status quo, or wanting an end to an apartheid state. And all that does is legitimize the existence of Israel as a state to begin with on Palestinian land. Please go make the Europeans confront their anti-Semitism and establish Israel in Germany. But they won't ever advocate for that. It was never even an option because it was a settler colonial project from the start. Israel was. Zionism is the ideology, right? So of course they were looking, in Africa, then the quote unquote Middle East. Why? Well, because those are places where you could exterminate the indigenous population. You could conquer that land. You can't pull that shit off in Europe. Hitler tried to essentially colonize Europe. And look what happened to him.
Admit that when I first started out, we were a handful of people, Jews, who opposed what Israel was doing. But the spectrum has radically changed in recent years. I'm just one among a large number, a sea of Jews who oppose what's going on, not because they're self-hating, not because they're indifferent to the fate of Israelis, but because the evidence is overwhelming. It's impossible. You start out by saying you're not knowledgeable about the topic. Fair enough, there are 10,000 topics I'm not knowledgeable about, and where you have much more knowledge. I'm quite certain of that. But this is not a particularly complicated situation right now. The Israeli government is openly, unabashedly, flagrantly, blatantly, it's declared a war of genocide on the people of Gaza.
And that's what I keep repeating, right? I keep saying, like, yo, this isn't a complicated issue. It's just colonization. Stop allowing the illusion, the facade, that it's about religion. Make this more complicated than it is. It isn't. These people, these European Zionists, are not the Jews of the Bible, of the Torah, right? They're not. The same way that some evangelical in the South isn't, the Christians of the Bible, of the New Testament. They're not.
That's not exaggerated language. The Prime Minister of Israel said in a speech which has been reproduced everywhere, he said, this is a war against Amalek, referring to the Old Testament. And what's a war against Amalek? We'll just open up the Old Testament. it obliges Israel to kill every man, woman, and child. That's what it means to invoke a war against Amalek. Can there
You see how these Zionists weaponize Judaism for their own like demonic end? It, it's no different than the president saying, "Oh, I prayed and God spoke to me and He said we should invade X country." No different than that. Death cults. That's what they are.
be any doubt? No, I mean this seriously. Can there be any doubt in the minds of any objective observer when Israel declares a policy of prohibiting any food, water, fuel, or electricity from entering Gaza? If that's their declared policy. Now, I know that you're an expectant mother, so bear in mind what that means to you. Now, Ms. Owens, I'm not sure if you are aware that 1/2 of the population of Gaza, its total population is 2.3 million, about 1.15 million are children. They're like the child that you have and the child that you are expecting.
And how many of those kids are orphans? That's the other fucked up part.
Now, some people will say, I'm playing on people's emotions, but I do not believe that you as a mother would say it's manipulative, it's demagogic for me to say it is not a complicated question when a country has a declared policy of denying a population food, water, fuel, electricity. That is not complicated. So I won't even allow for the option of saying, well, I'm ignorant, I don't know. Sorry, it doesn't require a lot of knowledge. And at the risk of offending some of your listeners, if you saw Jews being shoved into gas chambers, it would not require a lot more knowledge to know there's something awry here.
Exactly. But the issue is, Westerners only have that imagery of genocide. Right? If there's no gas chambers, it's not a genocide for them in their eyes because they only know about World War II because the US were the quote unquote good guys in that. So that's the only relationship or understanding they have with what a genocide is and how it's conducted. Add to the fact that they only value white lives. And despite of all Hitler's rhetoric and all the anti-Semitism, even in the United States, Jews in Europe were at least still seen as somewhat white. So we're more sympathetic to them as, in that Western mindset than we are against genocides committed against brown and black people, especially black people.
Something very egregiously, horribly wrong going on. Every hospital in Gaza now has been disabled. Every hospital has been disabled. You're an expectant mother. Do you really have doubts, questions, reservations, qualms about whether that is right? Every few years, literally every few years, Israel has a policy of what it calls mowing the lawn in Gaza. I've written quite a lot on those mowings of the lawn, but I have a question for you. And I do not believe these are rhetorical questions. These are factual questions. How do you react? You as a human being, as a woman, as a mother, how would you react to the usage of that phrase, mowing the lawn of a people, when 1.1 million of those people are children? Do you get that? Mowing the lawn of 1.15 million children. Now, that may be the first time you've heard that expression.
It is.
But I've heard it for years and years and years. And nobody.
How is that not genocidal rhetoric? To dehumanize somebody to such a point that you're not even comparing them as to an animal at that point. You're comparing them just as just foliage. Just background. Because animals, at least you could sympathize with, right? At least when they're young, cubs, whatever. Even fucking baby crocodiles are cute. people might push back at eating even a snake. But you know what nobody concerns themselves about? It's mowing your grass. Nobody bats an eye about that. So it's dehumanization to such a level that it's a part of nature to rid yourself of Palestinians when you're an Israeli. When you're the Israeli government, it's just part of maintaining the landscape is occasionally mass murdering Palestinians.
But even bats an eyelash at that expression to mow the lawn in Gaza. In 2008, 2009, Operation Cast Lead, they mowed the lawn, killed 350 children. 2014, Operation Protective Edge, they mowed the lawn again, killed 550 children. And now they're mowing the lawn again and have killed 4,000 to date, 4,500 children. They make up these stories that we have to turn off the incubators in the hospitals because there's a Hamas command and control center in the basement, say, most recently, of Al-Shifa Hospital. And then the spokesperson for our US Department of Defense, John Kirby, he gives a news conference 3 days ago, and he says, we have intelligence information confirming that there is a Hamas command and control center. And that justifies in the minds of the public opinion that then it's okay to deny fuel to the incubators. Imagine you, Candace, your child is born prematurely and is put in an incubator where the fuel is cut off and your child that you've been carrying for 9 months suffocates to death. Was there a Hamas command and control center in Gaza? Answer, no. Was Hamas's leadership in the basement of Al-Shifa Hospital? Answer, no. Were there hostages beneath Al-Shifa Hospital? Answer, no. You just get the lies and more lies and more lies and more lies. And attendant upon those nonstop lies are the cessation, the termination of life. Because of the lies, the termination of life of thousands of Palestinian children. Is that complicated? Does it require a PhD in Middle East studies to figure these things out? In my book,
Most of us, well, at least in my age demographic, too young or not even born for the US invasion of Iraq. But this whole incubator, babies in incubators, the way that history echoes, the way that perpetrators of violence, colonizers, the true terrorist states, the way that they have to make up lies in order to justify their atrocities. Those lies are more often than not the reality lived by the oppressed, the colonized, the subjugated, the true victims. And this is a prime example. Israel has to lie, along with the US, about Hamas hiding in hospitals. And that's why we have to essentially kill, directly or indirectly, patients in that hospital, doctors in the hospital, as well as babies in incubators. And here's the example. This is the same. This is a lie that the US had to use to invade Iraq. Babies in incubators was a good enough reason to invade Iraq, even though it was a lie. We know that in Palestine, babies in incubators are dying because of Israel's actions. But instead, that's a good enough reason to fund them, to send billions of dollars over there, to send countless weapons over there. Some of y'all must not remember Here it is.
He served one term in the Oval Office, but the blowback from his 1991 invasion of Iraq is still being felt today. Although the Gulf War technically ended in February 1991, the U.S. war on Iraq would continue for decades, first in the form of devastating sanctions, and then in the 2003 invasion launched by George H.W. Bush's son, George W. Bush. Thousands of U.S. troops and contractors remain in Iraq today.
We look back now at a largely forgotten aspect of Bush's war in Iraq, the vast domestic propaganda campaign that occurred in the United States before the invasion began. The story centers on a young Kuwaiti woman named Nayira. On October 10th, 1990, the 15-year-old girl gave riveting testimony before Congress about the horrors inside Kuwait after Iraq invaded.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Nayira, and I just came out of Kuwait. My sister, my 5-year-old nephew, traveled across the desert to safety. There was no milk available for the baby in Kuwait. They barely escaped when their car was stuck in the desert sand, and help came from Saudi Arabia. I stayed behind and wanted to do something for my country. The second week after the invasion, I volunteered at the Al-Adan hospital with 12 other women who wanted to help as well. I was the youngest volunteer. The other women were from 20 to 30 years old. While I was there, I saw the Iraqi soldiers come into the hospital with guns. They took the babies out of the incubators. And left the children to die on the cold floor. It was horrifying. I could not help but think of my nephew.
Nayira's testimony was rebroadcast across the country and marked a turning point in public opinion on going to war. President George H.W. Bush repeatedly cited her claims.
They had kids in incubators, and they were thrown out of the incubators so that Kuwait could be systematically dismantled.
3 months after Nayira testified, President George H.W. Bush launched the invasion of Iraq. But it turned out Nayira's claims weren't true. No human rights group or news outlet could confirm what she said. It also turned out Nayira was not just any Kuwaiti teenager. She was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States, Saad Nasir al-Sabah. She had been coached by the public relations firm Hill & Knowlton, who was working for the Kuwaiti government. We're joined now by the journalist who first revealed.
Do you see the shit these monsters have to make up? Things of nightmares. Are the things, or is the reality that Palestinians are living with? Babies in incubators. Enough to start a war with Iraq. But yet for Israel, it's enough to fund them. To fund their actions. These same atrocities. It's horrific. Tinfoil used to keep babies alive, with incubators losing power at Gaza hospital, as tanks surround outside. Palestinian health officials say patients dying due to energy shortage as fighting between Israel and Hamas intensifies. It's fucking two-sided bullshit. Tiny babies drowned by their nappies, which are far too big, lie in rows in an ordinary hospital bed lined with aluminum foil. The rib cages of nearly all of the premature newborns stick out in lines through their skin. The foil is a makeshift solution to try to keep in warmth, to stop the babies, who weigh just a few pounds each and should be in incubators, dying of cold. So far, 3 of the 39 babies in Al-Shifa Hospital, Gaza's largest, have died as fuel has run out and the incubators have switched off. According to Palestinian medics, a total of 32 patients have died since Al-Shifa's emergency generators ran out of fuel on Saturday, according to the health ministry in Hamas-run Gaza. Even then, when they're talking about dead patients, they had to throw in, oh, Hamas, it's Hamas. Why are they dying? Because of Israel. That's why. Dr. Medhat Abbas, a director of Al-Shifa, and a top official in the health ministry in Gaza, said that 4 of the premature babies in the hospital have no mothers, as they were born through emergency cesareans while their injured mothers were dying. The lies the U.S. had to make up to invade Iraq are the truth that Palestinians are going through. And the US is just funding Israel more to promote this, to continue this. It's disgusting.
At the risk of offending some people in the audience, and maybe that's why I react as I do.
It's fucking disgusting. It's like the hypocrisy is just like an added.
Gaza is half the population, suffers what international humanitarian organizations call, quote, severe food insecurity, which is to say half the population of Gaza never felt what it was like to have a full stomach.
You've been to Gaza.
Half the population of Gaza is unemployed. Among youth, it's 70%. Highest unemployment rate of any area in the world. Now, that's the facts, the separate facts.
Have you been to Gaza, Norm?
Yes, I've been to Gaza.
Yeah, I think I read that in your bio. You spent some summers there?
No, I spent summers in the West Bank.
Okay, so not in Gaza, but in the West
Bank. Two trips, I think, to Gaza. But you know, my age, I can't even remember how many times I was there, but I think I was there 2 or 3 times. Yeah, 3 times. In any event, if you take all the facts together, what do you get? David Cameron, the former Conservative Prime Minister of the UK, he described Gaza as an open-air prison. One of the senior officials, I would like your audience to listen, plant it in your mind. One of Israel's senior security officials, Giora Eiland, E-I-L-A-N-D, still a very prominent figure in Israeli security establishment. In 2004, before the blockade, he described Gaza as, quote, a huge concentration camp. That didn't come from some Hamas propaganda leaflet. That was and is a senior official in Israel's security establishment. In March 2004, he described Gaza as a huge concentration camp. Now, I want to bring it up to the present.
You see how not only is this not complicated, but this hasn't been a secret. Not from its inception. The Zionists, they were writing and they were quite open about it. It's a colonization process. A lot of their organizations included the phrase colonization. Because back then it was a sense of pride and joy. At least it was more upfront to be a European able to colonize land. It's almost your God-given right. So they weren't ashamed about it. And they weren't hiding it initially. At least not to the rest of the world. They were trying to stall out and buy time against, the Palestinians in that land. But in terms of the way they were speaking to like government officials in Europe, they weren't shy about what they were amongst each other. They were proud of the colonization process. So it's never been a secret. And here we have somebody, in the Israeli military apparatus outright saying it. Yeah, we're running a concentration camp. And people still dispute whether or not a genocide is occurring. People still want to defend the continued existence of Israel on Palestinian land. Go to Germany, try that shit against the people that committed a Holocaust against you.
Number one, it's not just a concentration camp. It's a killing field. Because every few years, as I've already said, Israel goes in and mows the lawn in Gaza. Kills in Operation Cast Lead, 1,400 people. Operation Protective Edge, 2,200 people. And that's leaving aside a slew of other operations. So what's the bottom line to bring us up to the present? The bottom line is, those young folks who crashed the gates of Gaza on October 7th, those young men, probably down to the last, had been born into that concentration camp. All they had to do, those young men, for 20 years, was to pace the perimeter of Gaza. No jobs, no food, no past, no present, no future. That's Gaza. Now, you might say, okay, he's trying to make an apology for those young men. I'm not going to make an apology. I'm stating the facts. Now, you know,
And that's why the IDF cannot win. These freedom fighters have lived in conditions that we can't even imagine since birth. They have unquestionably lost loved ones to the Zionists. Without a doubt, every single one of them. And as Norm says, they had no future. Their past was taken from them. You really think you could beat a force like that? You think you could defeat somebody who you stripped everything away from, including their humanity? What, some soft yuppies? Some hipsters are going to defeat them? Not a fucking chance. People forget that in Vietnam, the U.S. lost to rice farmers. No, the U.S. lost, to rice farmers who had already been fighting the French, who were conditioned by colonization and oppression to withstand the brutality of the colonizer. And that's when we had the draft, right, for Vietnam. People that did not want to fight, people that did not want to be there, people that did not believe in that war, that weren't fighting for anything other than for themselves. And what do you have in Israel? Forced conscription. These are not fucking badass warriors that they believe. They all believe they're fucking David from the Bible, from the Torah, whatever. The Old Testament. They all believe they're David. No. You're Goliath if you never got off the fucking couch. I have no doubt. No fucking doubt. That unless Israel uses a fucking nuclear weapon, which will be at that point suicidal, they will never defeat the Palestinians. Never. They're incapable of it. They want to, right? They will do everything they can to exterminate them. But they will not be successful. October 7th proved that. And it was a fucking glorious day. And anybody that apologizes for it is a Zionist. If you want to add liberal Zionist to it, go right ahead.
In our own history, we had the slave rebellions. Okay? Take the case of Nat Turner. I was recently reading about Nat Turner. Actually, a very interesting guy. He was a brilliant fellow, you know. He had this prodigious knowledge of the Bible. White folks acknowledged Nat Turner was a very smart guy. One of his biographers says that Nat Turner was consumed by rage because of, and I'm quoting the biographer now, because of the prodigious chasm between what he possessed in intelligence, maybe even genius, the aspirations he harbored on the one hand, and then on the other hand, he was born into slavery. No past, no present, and what caused the rage inside him, says his biographer, no future. So when Nat Turner and his Confederates erupt in rebellion, truth be told, the order he gave was kill all whites. That's what they said. And they did. They went, it was only 2-day rampage, but they beheaded babies. They did terrible things. No question about it. But nowadays, the story only begins with October 7th. Do you think it's right, Candace, when discussing Nat Turner, not to ask any question except, isn't Nat Turner a human animal because of what he did on the rampage? That's the beginning. Not to mention that Nat Turner was born into slavery. Isn't that a relevant fact when you try to gauge and understand what happened in the Nat Turner rebellion? But we're not allowed to mention anything before October 7th. We are not allowed to say that those young men were born in a concentration camp by definition and description of a senior person in Israel's security establishment. We have to start with October 7th and white out, to use the current lingo, to cancel and erase their existence before October 7th. And just as it's morally depraved to forget that Nat Turner was a slave, and a very smart one at that, it's equally morally depraved to forget where these young men came from.
Norm's used this example, this comparison, quite a bit now. Nat Turner did nothing wrong. In fact, Nat Turner did what every abolitionist should have been advocating for. The world would be a better place. That's just fact. That's just reality. Slaveholders, every single one of them, none of them should have been spared. Because they just pass on that racism from one generation to the next. To this fucking day. Now, some people, some Zionist apologists, might push back on that example, that comparison. Well, Palestinians are not slaves. So what you're saying is this comparison is objectively wrong from the start. Two completely distinct situations. That's why I would encourage Norm Finkelstein to start reading about indigenous history here in the United States and the resistance. Because that is more accurate, right? Indigenous people putting the same type of violence, inflicting the same type of punishment that the colonizers inflicted upon them, but with righteous reason, which is justice, which is self-defense. That is a more accurate, because it's true. Palestinians were not enslaved. And in a lot of ways, it diminishes the atrocities that Africans face, the chattel slavery, the forced breeding, literally treated like beasts of burden. Something Palestinians and most indigenous people here within the United States, within those borders, did not face. So those indigenous, those natives who resisted and fought back to the same level of vengeance as Nat Turner are just and equally justified in their actions. John Brown, Nat Turner, and every Palestinian resistance fighter are justified and did nothing wrong. And it would be a better world if that's how justice was met out to these colonizers. Because there's only violence when the colonized do it, when the oppressed do it. All right. Into the nonsense, into the gutter, into the garbage, into the disgrace. And to give him Piers Morgan's what he wants more than anything, which is attention, clicks, validation, the spotlight. I hate spoilers, y'all. But let's start off with the fucking spoiler.
I found that quite a dispiriting hour. I've got to be honest with you.
Doesn't matter.
I thought both of you let yourselves down. I gave you a great opportunity here.
We gave you an
to try and
opportunity as well, Piers. Come on.
Well, fine. You can say what you like about me. I don't care.
We gave you an audience. You gave us an audience.
It's fine. But it's not just about the audience. It's about a big audience, which we're getting for all these shows. About a big audience seeing people try to come together.
Sanctimonious, though.
Nobody here has seen you even try to come together.
Why would
you know, Piers. You know, for all my criticisms of Mohammed Hijab in this disgraceful display of representing Palestinians on this platform, he's right. Piers Morgan is trying to be sanctimonious, righteous, the white savior giving equal footing to both the oppressor and the oppressed. And who is the oppressor and who is the oppressed? Who knows? Because Piers Morgan is just neutral arbiter. Again, check out Low Key on Mohammed Hijab's podcast. And Low Key explains all the ties and connections that Piers Morgan has to Zionism and Zionists. But that's a spoiler, right? In this regard, Piers Morgan is correct. It was a waste of time. But Mohammed Hijab is correct that Piers got what he wanted, the rage bait. And he wanted chaos. Otherwise, it would have been a more organized, quote unquote, debate. It would have been an actual debate instead of a 1 minute grace period to speak and then crossfire. Let's see some of this fucking chaos.
So the first theme is a simple one. Are Hamas to blame? You have a minute, Mohammed, from now.
Immediately off the bat, and why this guy's a fucking Zionist propagandist. Not asking who's to blame, immediately putting on Hamas. And mind you, everybody has to remember, it wasn't just Hamas. It was a collection. It was a unification of all liberation forces in Gaza. So don't let them lie to you and say, oh, it's just Hamas. Hamas is the only problem. As any resistance is a problem. Any resistance to colonization is a problem to these people.
From one perspective, Hamas started the battle because obviously from October 7th, even they themselves title it Tufan al-Aqsa or the flooding of al-Aqsa. But from another perspective, if you really look at it from an international law perspective, we're talking about 1967, we're talking about Syria Resolution 242, in which it is actually stated that Israel is in a belligerent state because they're occupying the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. And they have been, so therefore the war has been continual for a very long time according to international law. But let's remove Hamas from the situation altogether. Let's remove them. What do you have? You have the West Bank. And what do you have in the West Bank? You have 187 children who have been put in prisons. They have been put in prisons, according to Bet Salem, without charge. You have 44 children before October the 7th that have been killed before October the 7th in just 2023 alone. So if you remove Hamas from the equation, what you have the West Bank. You remove dominance from the equation, you have the West Bank, and what you have occupation, you have settlement, which you condemned, rightfully so. You condemned that on your show. The settlement's there.
Okay. Rabbi Shmuley, 1 minute to respond.
Not a bad start. Not a bad start. Definitely not as radical as we would like. Calling for the complete liberation of Palestine and the decolonization process to begin. But not a bad start at all.
Resolution 242 in the UN doesn't mention a single thing about aggression or aggressor. That is a total fabrication, and it speaks about disputed territories. But let's be clear. The occupier of Gaza is Hamas. They won an election in 2006.
I don't understand why he puts air quotes. When one, that's what the Zionist right wanted. And two, they were essentially forced to run. And three, even Jimmy Carter agreed that it was a fair election. And four, after the election, not only does Israel initiate a blockade, but also they try to coup the legitimate, democratically elected government of Hamas.
Had a civil war with Mahmoud Abbas, took the Palestinian Authority officials, threw them off buildings, killed Muslims, killed Arabs.
The Palestinian Authority, the same ones that are align and collaborating with their colonizers, the Zionists in the West Bank, those same ones that all these liberal Zionists like Sam Cedar, Emma Vigeland, all those guys, Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian, want to impose on the Palestinians in Gaza for their convenience, right?
Abbas is afraid to go to Gaza. He's terrified of Hamas. He hasn't been there since 2007. And let's be clear, Hamas is an abomination to Islam. Sultan Salah al-Din, the greatest Muslim conqueror of all time, after whom the main artery in Gaza is named, he said that you have to allow all prisoners to be redeemed. He would never hold hostages. And remember, Islam is about fair treatment to prisoners of war. Hamas beheaded Thai non-Jewish workers. You asked your last appearance here for real first-hand sources. I'm the first-hand source. I saw it in Kibbutz Alumim. They raped women. They had sex with dead women's bodies. They are evil, and do the right thing and call them evil.
All right.
That's how you know this guy's just disgusting propagandist. I'm sure he is a fucking reliable first. like he was there, like he witnessed these things happening. You're telling me that the state of Israel, the same ones that has the Hannibal protocol, which is to essentially murder Israelis in order to avoid them being captured or held hostage. Notice how he mentions that under Islam, you shouldn't hold hostages, but he never mentions whether under Zionism, you can't hold hostages. Because they do. They do. That's what Gaza's been. Gaza in its entirety was being held hostage. That's what a blockade does.
A minute each. Okay, we've got a passionate start. Mohammed, let me ask you about Hamas.
I want to first, before you do that, I want to commend you, Piers, honestly, because bringing me on for the second time, I have to commend you. And the fact that you actually condemned the settlements is very good, but people want to know, do you think the IDF are a terrorist organization?
No.
You don't think that's a terrorist? Okay, well, if you look at the UN definition of terrorist organization, they say killing civilians for political
You're asking my opinion.
No, but
I don't think they are
according to UN definition, it's killing civilians for political objectives. Why are they not terrorist organizations?
Well, you've asked me a straight question. I don't think they are terrorist.
So when you see babies like this, the ones who kill babies like this are not terrorists.
It's horrific.
So people kill babies like this are terrorists.
Well, let me respond. Let me respond. You can both into this. Here's my response to that. I thought carefully about this. I'll be very honest about my own feelings. I have a real moral quandary about this.
All right,
because as a father, I hate these scenes of kids being killed in Gaza. It's horrific, right? We all know it's horrific.
Well, they're terrorist organizations.
I'm about to explain to you what I think my position is. My position is after what happened on October the 7th, it was so barbaric, so disgusting.
So you can kill children?
Well, no, what you can do.
That's exactly what terrorists say.
Let me answer your
This is not this is someone else becoming the host of the show and now interviewing you. I thought we were being interviewed. Mohammed, you and I are being interviewed. You're not here to interview him. Don't make him lose control of his own show. You do this all the time. It will not. I'm not going to let it happen tonight.
Let me answer.
No. Stop interviewing the interviewer and be respectful. And be respectful.
Let me respond. No, I do not believe so.
You see that Rabbi Shmuley just can't handle the fact that anybody might say something negative about the IDF, about Israel. Piers Morgan will never view the IDF, will never view any European as a terrorist. Because there's only fucking savage brown people who are terrorists in his eyes.
They kill civilians for political.
Let me answer.
Go ahead.
Okay. Here's my answer to that. When Hamas did what they did, two things. One, Hamas knew exactly what Israel's response would be. They knew they would come incredibly hard.
I don't absolve them.
But wait a minute. I'm not absolving anybody.
I'm not.
Why would they get hostages? Oh, to prevent all this.
Loving them.
Okay.
I'm saying the West Bank is Hamas.
Let me answer you.
44 children killed like this in the West Bank.
This is ridiculous.
Wait a minute, Robert. Let me just ask you quickly.
Go ahead.
I believe Israel has a right to defend itself from after that terror.
But can they kill children?
Wait a minute.
Can they?
Wait a minute. Particularly after the Hamas spokesman only last week said that they want to do this again and again and again. That's an existential threat to Israel.
Why don't they fight man?
Wait a minute. Let me answer you, Mohammed.
Why?
Let me answer you.
A ratio of 100 to 1, by the way.
Let me answer you.
100 to 1 ratio.
Let me answer you.
Go ahead.
Otherwise, it's pointless.
Go ahead.
So I agree that Israel must defend itself. I agree they have to get rid of Hamas because Hamas is wedded to an ideology of existentially removing
Is this
Israel.
acceptable?
Wait a minute. I'm coming to your answer. I'm coming to your answer.
This is not.
No, wait, this is not even a conversation.
Wait a minute.
I came all the way to the debate, and he will not let anyone else speak. And if that's how he shows work, no. You are rude, you are a bully, you just are trying to interrupt me. I didn't have a chance to speak, or there's no point in doing this show. You did this last time and you allowed him to, but I won't allow him to, because I will never be bullied by a bully.
I will never be bullied by a bully. Who the fuck is bullying you then? If not a bully, who? Who is bullying you? Is this, again, this David complex? Is that a fucking thing? Is the David complex a thing where you think you're the little guy? You think you're the victim? You think you're the one standing up to injustice? You're the brave one speaking up. Meanwhile, you're advocating for ethnic cleansing and the genocide.
Wait
wait a minute. No one's allowing me to answer your question. And it's this. I believe Israel has a right to defend itself. I agree that they need to get rid of Hamas.
This way?
In this way. Well, here's the quandary for me morally, right?
Why is that quandary?
I'll tell you why.
With Hamas, it's not quandary.
I'll tell you why. Because in war, when you declare war, as Britain did with the Nazis.
100 to 1 ratio.
No, of course, there are a
ratio.
far higher number of children in Gaza, proportion to population, than almost anywhere in the world. So when they go after Hamas, very sadly, let me finish.
No. You are the one who insisted on equal time. I never did. You will not respect
I will
equal
come
time.
to you literally in 30 seconds. In 30 seconds, I'll come to you. Let me finish, please. I am in charge, Mohammed. So my final point on this is, unfortunately, in war, civilians get killed.
100 to 1 ratio.
Yes,
100 to 1 ratio.
yes, they get killed.
No, not 100 to 1 ratio. It's not
Civilians get killed.
Piers,
No, that's really, you
know, Piers, can I say
I was actually great. Like a great start. His opening was great, concise, and then putting Piers on his toes, being like, wait, if you're considering Hamas a terrorist organization, which it isn't, it's a liberation force, why wouldn't you consider the same for the IDF, who actually goes out of his way to murder more civilians? It's because Piers, these colonizers cannot view their fellow whites, their fellow European, as to be equally as savage as black or brown people. They just can't fathom that. They don't hold them to the same standard. The leeway, the space for acceptance is so much wider and whiter.
Respectfully, and I mean this is no insult. I'm amazed that you're intimidated by this man. I feel well, with all due respect. If I can speak. I wouldn't bring him back. If I can speak. No, he does not, because I have before he did this debate, he went on X on Twitter and said, I'm only doing it if it's equal time. And then he is violating that. I never asked for equal time. I just want to be heard, but he won't even let me be heard. Let me explain something to you. You said in a video the other day, and you can look me in the eye, you said that Jews are now trembling. Muhammad, I am not, no, don't interrupt me. I am not trembling. It's all on my Instagram page. Now, you see this yarmulke? It means that I represent something. I'm an ambassador. You're an ambassador of Islam. You are talking about a religion that started the world's first universities, educated women. Fatima started the first university in the 9th century in Fez, Morocco. Now we have a man who says that he's a representative of Islam. He goes to Speaker's Corner. He speaks about whether 5-year-old girls are old enough for sex. He said,
all right, this is where the shit gets disgusting. But I want to note it that is Rabbi Shmuley here, who first starts talking about sex, sexualizing the conversation. Completely irrelevant to the topic. But I wanted it to be noted that he is the first one to mention sex in this inappropriate, disgusting manner. He weaponizes it first.
Says that gay men are dying of AIDS as a punishment from God. I'm sorry to say this to the listeners.
That what do you say, that gay men are dying of AIDS because of like God is punishing them? Again, a big Zionist playbook, a big propaganda line in their playbook is to make it seem that Israel, the Zionists, are accepting of gays, that they're just more accepting people. One, this is bullshit. But two, much like we see here in the States, gays are accepted as long as two things: you're white and you're affluent. If you're white, you get by with a lot. But if you have the money and the whiteness, by all means. Especially if you act out patriarchal norms, even fucking better, right? But to paint Muslims as inherently more homophobic than any other group, it's ridiculous. It's the same thing that the liberal leftists and right wingers try to do with the black community. They try to paint the black community as more or as inherently more homophobic than white people, because white people want to be seen and perceived the same way as the Zionists do, as more accepting, more evolved, less prejudice, always in their convenience, always for their benefit.
that blood is gushing from their backsides. Because they're better off, you know what it is? Because you are desecrating a great religion. Now let me tell you why. Let me tell you why it's here. Because he will defend. I will. He will defend Hamas's butchery, savagery. He doesn't care that Hamas is an abomination to Islam because Islam, the children in Gaza are dying because Hamas uses them as bulletproof vests. The United States and France and England said yesterday that the Al-Shifa hospital is a military base. It has a tiny veneer.
Yo. He just mentioned like all the colonizing countries. Hold on, give me a second. Let me bring in my dog because she's going down back there. All right, homie's all hyped up. I don't know what was going on back there. Still going on, but he's hyped up. All right, where were we?
And that's a tiny veneer of emergency rooms. But underneath all of it is a military base. And let me tell you something. If it's true that any of these countries care about the Muslims in Gaza because they believe what he's saying that Israel's killing them, this is a map of all the countries that took place last week in Riyadh to save the Palestinians of Gaza from Israel. Do you know how many? That's Israel, a tiny thing. You know how many of them took in even one Palestinian from Gaza? Zero, nothing. Look at that map.
Two things. Notice how he says, see that little tiny dot? Again, the David complex. Oh, we're just innocent, tiny, little speck. Meanwhile, you're like the only one with nuclear weapons in that region. Two, he's advocating for the quote-unquote neighboring Arab countries to take in Palestinians. Well, everybody's refusing because they've seen this before. They know what happens when you take in Palestinian refugees. They're never allowed to go back into Israel, and Israel expands its colonial project. But they try to villainize the Arab population, right? For not stepping up. Now they haven't stepped up in militarily defending Palestinians, and we'll get into that later specifically. But in terms of not accepting refugees and not playing the Zionist game, they're correct in that.
The Arabs want to see. The Arabs want to see Hamas. Don't intimidate me. Don't bully me.
Don't intimidate me. Don't bully me. Always the victim. Oh, such bravery.
Guys, I've got a better last question. It's a debate. Let me ask you one specific question which you raised, which I don't think actually is your belief. I don't think you have defended what Hamas did on October the 7th. Yeah. I think you share our view.
Yeah, because he's fucking a coward, bro. He's not advocating for liberation.
Unless I'm wrong.
Are they evil? Are they evil?
You're now doing what you accuse him of doing. So let me ask you, what is your view of Hamas post October 7th?
I think that they, just like anybody else, have to be examined, have to look at all.
What's your opinion about them?
Yeah, I think that, look, here's my opinion. Let me be straightforward about this, right? Anybody who kills civilians, anybody, whether it's the IDF, I'm consistent in this manner. If it's proven beyond reasonable doubt that these people have killed civilians in both of our faith traditions, in Islam and Judaism, in the Quran is mentioned, in the Prophet, he said it himself, you cannot kill a woman, you cannot kill a child. I condemn them. That's what I do. Straight away, whether he's Muslim, whether he's non-Muslim, whether he's Christian or anybody else. I've already said that. So I'm not being inconsistent here. My question is, if that is exactly the barometer that we're using, if that's the moral reasoning that we're using, then we have to say, look, if you have a 100-to-1 ratio, and that's what it is, 100-to-1 ratio. And you know, I got this figure. I got this figure from the IDF themselves because they reported.
Okay, let me ask you this. Does Hamas deserve to stay in power after what they did?
I don't think we should have Hamas in power. What I think we should. No, let me tell you. We should have a Palestinian authority with bigger armies and airports, with proper tanks and with airplanes like every country.
You know what? You might be right.
What he's advocating essentially is a two-state solution. Again, the two-state solution, one, is incongruent with the Zionist ideology, but two, would only leave Palestinians in a worse off situation in the sense that you have a state with two unconnected regions. So now you need to have connecting a through line, which leaves you vulnerable. But two, you have a fundamentally extremist state, colonial settler project in Israel that has and will continue to create situations in order to start wars and gain land. If the Palestinians are given this mythical second state, how soon before Israel creates situations, conditions, or outright commits acts to start a war? So now you have a legitimate war of two opposing armies, and you could destroy and conquer the other. If you make it look like it's the Palestinians that initiated this. Because again, the David complex, always a perpetual victim is Israel. And that is their best PR, their best propaganda method is to be seen as the victim, to portray themselves as the victim.
Absolutely. They won't allow it.
How do you
The Israelis won't allow
get
that.
rid of Hamas?
What you don't do, I can tell you for a fact, is try and kill 30,000 of them with a 100-to-1 ratio. Because if you do that, then you're committing genocide. Because you have to kill 3 million Palestinians.
Rabbi Shmuley,
Do you even know the definition of genocide?
I haven't said genocide.
What's it? You just said it.
No, I said-
You just
I said
said
if
it.
you-
What is the definition of genocide? What's the definition?
I said if you
You
do
always
it.
claim to be an academic. You're always doubting your Oxford credentials. What is the definition of genocide? Genocide is where genocide is where
I
you
didn't accuse you of anything.
you target an ethnicity for extinction. Geno, ethnicity-side murder.
Yes, if you do.
Excuse me.
There are 1.8 million
Muslim Arabs who live in total peace in Israel as equal citizens. In fact, Israel practiced reverse discrimination against the Jews because the Jews are conscripted to fight Hamas. So,
What is it about white supremacists and loving the phrase reverse discrimination, reverse racism? He says, oh, it's reverse racism, reverse discrimination, because the Israelis are forced to conscript into the IDF. What is it? To defend the Palestinians? Arabs? No. Y'all don't allow them as freely and as openly into the military because you don't want to train them. Because it is apartheid. Like, you just define apartheid yourself, but you flip the script and made it seem like you're victims for being put in this position by being part of the military, being trained, being equipped with methods and tactics to oppress the indigenous population. You're the real victim. Right. Let's move on to 1605.
All right, let's time out. Let's try and sort of over each other because the viewers can't hear it, right? I don't mind the passion. I don't mind the debate. I don't mind the fire. I do mind if you can't hear what you're saying. It's pointless. Let's go to the second topic, right? This time, Rabbi Shmuley, you will go first with a minute to say what you want to say, and then Mohammed.
Now, he doesn't mind the passion, aka brings the clicks in, but the audio, guys, it sounds bad if you guys start actually arguing because this isn't a legitimate debate. It's just for show. It's a wrestling. It's like wrestling. It's a performance.
So the theme is this, and the question is this for block 2. Has Israel gone too far in its response to the October the 7th terror attacks? Okay, Rabbi Shmuley, you have a minute starting now.
I just came here by taxi and passed the statue of Winston Churchill. That's in the lifetime of our parents, okay? He is the greatest British statesman of the 20th century. You know what he did when he had a genocidal threat, knowing that Hitler wanted to eviscerate and annihilate Britain? He carpet bombed all of Germany, Dresden, Essen, Hamburg. Israel has not even gotten close to that. Israel does not send its air force to carpet bomb cities. It sends its military. I have a friend who died, six children, 39, because he was personally trying to stop a Hamas terror tunnel. Israel is surgical. Israel is only going after the fighters. Israel has opened humanitarian corridors for the Palestinians to go south. Hamas shoots them to make sure they don't go. Hamas builds its military structures. Right, Shifa Hospital is this much hospital and it's this much military. They love using Palestinians, and that's why they've stolen their money. They got about $16 billion from the international community. There isn't one bomb shelter in Gaza. They don't care about the civilians at all. Israel's doing the right thing.
Mohammed, you have a minute.
What I'm saying is the 100-to-1 ratio comes from the following figures. We know that 10,000 civilians have died. Of them, according to the IDF.
Imagine to still uphold Churchill as a great statesman. Like, literally, that should be like, if you think Churchill is somebody to admire, shit, buddy, that might be your sign. That might be the new fucking dog whistle right there. Promoting and upholding Churchill.
as reported by The Guardian, 60, dozens, they say, about 60 Hamas died, which we're being liberal by saying 100 to 1 figures. For every one Hamas, you have to kill 100 civilians. That's effectively what we're saying. If the trajectory continues as it is, then you have to kill 3 million Palestinian civilians in order to kill 30,000 Hamas fighters. If you want to extinguish them, eviscerate them, annihilate them, destroy them, you have to do that. Now you have Herzog, who is the president that you interviewed, saying that all Palestinians, they are responsible. This man is being more slippery. He's being more slippery than the lubricants that he sells in his daughter's sex shop. And that's the reality of the situation.
Did you really just say that? You know, you seem obsessed with Jewish sex. It's bizarre. Yesterday, you actually spoke about.
Okay. He makes such a great fucking point about the number of civilians being killed, or at least admitted to, because the numbers are going to be much higher in reality. But the number of civilians killed that the IDF are admitting, that the Zionists are admitting, that they have murdered, 100 to 1, right? So in order to achieve getting rid of Hamas, 30,000, you would essentially kill 3 million Palestinian civilians, is what he's saying, if you go that route, if you continue this process, if this is a strategy that you want to implement to its end, which will result in a genocide of Palestinians. Great fucking point. Even his demeanor, his delivery, his speech pattern was on point. His vocal tone, everything on point. What does this fucking moron do? This idiot decides to throw in a jab about sexual lubricants. Why? Why do that? Why diminish not just yourself, not just your argument, but diminish the Palestinian cause, the Palestinian struggle? You are there as a combatant in the propaganda war. And this is how you debase yourself? This is how you let your ego take over? Instead of staying composed, not for yourself, not for your fucking brand, but for the Palestinian struggle. But again, this is the second time you're on here. So it's not really about, you already delivered your message in support of Palestine and Palestinians. This is now just to generate more attention for yourself, for your own brand, for your own YouTube channel. There's a reason why certain people refuse to go on these shows that have integrity. And if they do decide to go on them, they deliver their message and don't go back. Don't entertain the circus. Or else you will become part of the show. You will be a clown. You're no longer visiting. Now you're a fucking resident.
About Ben Shapiro's wife.
Yes,
you actually you said to Ben Shapiro, your wife's a coward, you're more of a man. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes,
And you said the Jews have PTSD. You're speaking about sexual lubricants while people are dying. You know, Muhammad, get your head out of the Jewish bedroom. It's really bizarre.
Let me get it clear. No.
Sexual lubricants, how
Let me get it back.
You speak about 5-year-old girls being raped.
Let's
go back to the issue.
Question. Let me ask you.
That's just embarrassing. That's just disgraceful. They should have just cut the interview then and there. But again, to be clear, it was Rabbi Shmuley that first sexualized this conversation. So it was not Muhammad Hijab that threw the first stone, but it is Rabbi Shmuley that will be portraying himself as the victim because he can't handle the repercussions of debasing the conversation to such a level.
Question.
Why are you shaking?
Come on, it's a serious.
I think it's one of his daughters.
Come on, leave it, please. We're going to cut all this stuff out. So there's no point.
Why? Leave it. People want to see what you represent.
There's no point abusing each other personally.
See, Rabbi Shmuley, he recognizes the propaganda war, the aspect. His head's in the fucking game. He says, no, leave it. We want people to see, who he is, what he is. That right there should have been a wake-up call. That bell to remind Muhammad Hijab, composure. You're not there for yourself. You're not there to fucking win a debate, to look like a badass. You're there to speak for the Palestinian resistance. But this is a motherfucker that condemns Hamas, so of course he's in it for himself.
I want to stick to the debate. I don't want to do it. We'll end the debate.
Let's get to the debate.
Let me ask Muhammad a question. I don't disagree with you that so far it seems to me,
Yes.
obviously,
Yes.
a fact that many, many more Palestinian civilians, innocent people, are getting killed as retribution by the Israelis for what happened on October 7th. That's indisputable, right? Their argument is that they're going after a terror organization, Hamas, and unfortunately in war, as Rabbi Shmuley correctly said about what Churchill did in World War II.
Churchill was wrong.
Churchill
Churchill was wrong.
Okay.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
Churchill was all the British
Let me
people.
do the
George
question.
VI.
Let me do the
George
question.
VI. George VI.
All of the war criminals.
Yes,
Yes,
anyone,
his
hang on,
name-
Rabbi
war
Shmuley.
criminal.
Let me ask. So let me get
Absolutely.
straight. You think Winston Churchill
Was a war criminal.
in standing up to the Nazis,
By killing
who killed
babies.
12 million people, that by doing what he did was a war criminal?
By killing in Dresden and Hamburg. By indiscriminate killing. Collective punishment. My moral is that's impossible.
Okay, that means the British people.
See, again, props to Mohammed Hijab. Props. Calling it what it is. Killing civilians makes you a war criminal. What the U.S. did in purposely bombing civilian like cities, populations, Truman and all those motherfuckers should have been hanging. They're all war criminals. And Churchill was no different. Attacking civilians should always be unacceptable. In that case, what is the point of labeling anybody a civilian? If you belong from this country, if you belong from this group of people that are in a conflict with another group of people, everybody's fair game then. But when white people do it, it's not a war crime. When white people do it, it is not terrorism. Brave fucking heroes. They were willing to sacrifice. They're willing to go to sleep with nightmares in order to do the righteous kill. Righteous murder, a righteous genocide. That's how they view themselves.
That's
supported him and voted him in. They were also just a second.
That's why
The British people.
You believe he was a war criminal?
Yes.
So therefore, your belief is that no retaliatory action.
No, you retaliate to the man, not to the babies.
Tell me a war in history
Yes.
where civilians haven't been killed.
No,
That's how they justify genocide, by the way. For themselves, right? How they excuse their actions.
not saying civilians haven't killed. It's
Just
not the
war or
ratio.
otherwise.
What is the ratio?
No,
What is the ratio?
Actually, morally, okay. Hang on, Rabbi Shmuley. Let me give you a ratio.
Yeah.
How many people did the Nazis kill?
I don't know.
You don't know.
We know they killed 6 million.
They killed 12 million
I don't
people,
know. We don't know.
6 million Jews,
Sure,
right?
sure.
So
12 million
how many died in?
Immediately, it's about like how many Jewish people they killed. Because part of the Zionist project is to erase all the Romani people, all the disabled people, all the queer people that were first murdered, exterminated by the Nazis. They were the only true victims of the Holocaust. Check out the Holocaust industry by Noah Finkelstein.
In Dresden, how many civilians died in Germany? Do you know?
I don't know exactly.
Right, so you don't actually know what you're talking about.
I do not talk about.
You
I know
called
Dresden and Hamburg.
You said it's about you. Unless I'm wrong.
Yeah, go ahead.
Unless I'm wrong.
Yeah, go
You said it's to do with the
ratios.
The ratios.
Yes.
You don't know the ratios.
No, I know for a fact.
You call Winston Churchill.
What are the numbers? What are the numbers?
Just a minute, Rabbi Shmuley. When you call Winston Churchill a criminal for basing it on ratios, you don't even know what they are.
I know. There's difference of opinion.
No, there isn't. Tell us the opinion. What are they? Tell us.
Okay, hold on.
How many in Dresden?
Excuse me. Stop speaking.
How many in Dresden?
I'm speaking to
How many
you.
in Dresden?
Whatever the number.
You don't know
it's
at all.
indiscriminate. I'm against it.
No, he doesn't.
Right.
Dresden's about 25,000, and at the time, the Germans were saying 250,000. He knows about 25,000 today. Let me be clear. Winston Churchill was the greatest statesman of the 20th century. He saved the world from Nazi terror.
Jesus.
That you can live in a country that is only around today because
He dragged the U.S. into it, was already plotting to backstab the USSR. Right. Greatest statesman. A lot of famine to wipe out, major populations in India. But the greatest statesman, fucking A.
because of the bravery of that man showing no gratitude is the height of to call all the British people who defeated the Nazis, stop interrupting me, defeated the Nazis, war criminals, his parents, all the other people were war criminals. It's wrong. Now, let me be clear. Let me be clear. Mohammed Hijab trades in falsehoods. 300 to 1. What are you talking about? And now he says the Jews are about to kill 3 million Palestinians. The fact that this man considers himself an Oxford academic. I was a rabbi at Oxford University for 11 years. This is a travesty. This is a travesty. I have a rabbinical. Let me answer. Let me answer. Can I speak?
This is pointless. Rabbi Shmuley.
This is so stupid. Such a petty thing. Arguing about who graduated where. And to debase yourself to almost like a playground type of arguments.
Is there a limit to the number of civilians in Gaza that Israel can kill to try and
That's a good
eliminate
question.
Hamas?
That's a great question.
Yes, there is.
Thank you. Let me ask you.
Not even one. Not one beautiful Palestinian child should have to die because Hamas kicked out Mahmoud
That wasn't my
Abbas.
question.
And not one should have to die.
Jesus.
What the answer to your question is that Hamas, if they surrender unconditionally, then
Which they're not
all of
gonna
that,
do.
okay, fine.
But Israel limits.
Let them allow all the civilians.
Israel limits.
Israel said that all the civilians can leave. All the civilians should go south. They begged them, and that's something that militaries never do. Churchill did not tell the people. And Johnson, come on, and you came with all your notes.
We get the point.
I'm not here.
We get the point, Mohammed.
This is all proof that he can't debate me. He has to use these images. Debate me. We didn't ask you to come on with all your
Rabbi
exhibits.
Shmuley, let me ask you a question. A member of the cabinet.
He has this little map that he could use and point to make it seem like Israel's just this indefensive, this defenseless. They are indefenseless. If that's a word, you shouldn't and cannot defend Israel, a colonial settler project. But to be specific, he has his little map to make it look like Israel's defenseless, surrounded by these hordes of Arabs. And meanwhile, they're the most well-funded, the only nuclear power in the region, but they're the victims. And it's a colonial settler project, so it shouldn't even be in the region. Shouldn't even exist there. Should exist instead of Germany. But again, he can't answer the question without vilifying Hamas, Palestinian resistance. How dare they? This is what happens when you resist. We will murder children, is what the Zionists say.
In Israel was actually quoted as saying that nuclear weapons were an option that Israel could use. No one's ever confirmed Israel has nuclear weapons. It's long been suspected. That seems pretty clear confirmation.
Why are you against nuclear
Hang
weapons?
on.
If you're not against weapons, why are you against
Let me
nuclear
ask the question.
why are you against it?
I've done this before, this job. Let me do it. Okay. So when that guy says that, if you're living as an innocent civilian in Gaza, what the hell are you thinking? That an Israeli government member threatens the use of a nuclear weapon, which would obliterate pretty much all of Gaza and everyone in it?
Thank you for the question. If that were true, why hasn't Israel used nuclear weapons against Nasser when he invaded?
Hold on.
He said that's not true because it hasn't happened before. Meaning, Israel, with this logic, will never use, can't ever use nuclear weapons because it never has before. So why have them?
And the answer is no. I know the guy, and I spoke to him about it. His name is Amichai Eliyahu. Israel has never carpet bombed any Arab.
Hang on, Mohammed.
Ever. Now, he was asked a question by a provocative interviewer, and he said, "Well, if you're going to bomb the same thing, it was a Mohammed Jabhat. You want to kill all the Arabs? 3 million people drop a bomb." He said, "Well, if you want to drop a bomb, drop a bomb." He was being dismissive and stupid, and he put out a statement the next day saying that never in history would the Jews ever even contemplate doing that. Let's remember one thing: the only place in the Middle East, the only place in the Middle East where Arabs have any freedoms, Israel. The only place where they vote openly, Israel. The only place where Palestinian women can dress the way they want, Israel. And let's be clear: when Mohammed Hijab gets up and says that we Palestinians want to be a religion of death, I just got a haircut coming here by an Arab barber here in London, and he said to me, "I hope you defeat this guy because he doesn't represent us. We want to live. We want to have good lives. We want to be religious. We want to eat halal, but we don't want to die for martyrdom. You are not a Muslim. You're an Islamist. You're an Islamist."
Let me ask Mohammed a question.
The way that what is the equivalent of calling a Christian or a Jew an Islamist? What is that equivalent? Because Zionist is bad enough, but that's no inherent relationship to being Jewish, to practicing the Jewish faith. Because we know that Zionism weaponized and bastardized Judaism. But what equivalent is there to calling somebody not a Muslim, but an Islamist? When we know that Christianity and Judaism can both be as oppressive and as radical, as backwards as Islam. Yeah, it's the it's the Orientalism. Excuse me, it's the Orientalism.
The question you keep asking everybody. My answer to you is a proportionate response is one in which the ratios are not 100 to 1.
Your invention.
Excuse me, please.
Where does that come from? The source. When did they say this? I know all the ideas. I know Jonathan Goldberg. Daniel Dore said what?
Do you see this, Challenge? Got your tongue. Like, homie, compose yourself. You're not here for you. You're not here to win and score debate points. You're here to combat Zionist propaganda, not act like a fucking child on the playground. How do you think you look? How do you think you come off to somebody who is generally has never even heard or doesn't even know where Palestine is on the map? But because of October 7th, as the Palestinian Liberation Forces successfully put Palestine back on the map, back into the attention of people. How do you think you're coming off? Because you're not Palestinian yourself. So how do you think you're coming off?
Okay, so
no. When did he say we're killing?
It's 10 days ago, and it's mentioned on a website. I'll tell you
the truth is,
he never said.
Which
website? Al Jazeera?
No.
Is it Al Jazeera?
You get to his response. Go ahead. Okay, the response is as follows. The Guardian has reported that the IDF have said that in terms of the numbers of Hamas that have been killed, I'm answering this question. The Hamas that have been killed, they say, quote unquote, dozens. Now listen.
Hamas or civilians? You said civilians.
Wait a minute.
You said civilians.
I'm telling you, I got the 100-to-1 ratio. 100-to-1 ratio.
The numbers of
10,000 civilians. The number 60. It's actually more than
You still call out anything.
No one can hear what you're saying. Let me respond to him.
This is a blood libel. The Jews have a right to respond to blood libel.
Him.
It's a blood libel.
Here's the reality. I read that report. That was about at least 2 weeks ago, right? The numbers have changed a lot. Israel now believe they've killed a lot more Hamas. We don't know exactly how many, because actually, how do you tell on the ground?
By the way,
a Hamas fighter and a member of the general population.
You know, according to the IDF, we've done a study on the names that they put on X. They had 1,280 names that they put on X, and according to Haaretz, they put Haaretz is, as you know, is a left-wing newspaper in Israel. They also put the names of those who have been killed. Guess what? According to them, 340 military have been killed, which means Hamas's ratio of combatant to non-combatant is 3-to-1. Imagine Hamas is doing a better job in protecting civilians than Israel. 3-to-1.
I would say that Hamas, by what they did on October the 7th.
100-to-1 versus 3-to-1.
Wait a minute. Ordered by doing what they did, they ordered de facto the disintegration of northern Gaza that we're seeing,
of course,
and
all the civilians
the death of thousands of civilians. They knew what was going to happen. So that's why they should go.
In 2000.
So you see how Hamas is always the culprit. Hamas is always the cause. Always the effect. It's always Hamas. Hamas is everything. Hamas is the one ordering Israel, forcing Israel to kill Palestinians. It's Hamas. Hamas forced them. It's not like Hamas took hostages in order to negotiate and avoid all this. Hostages that Israel does not give a fuck about.
Because he won't. See, he will never condemn Hamas because
he has condemned.
No,
I've heard him do it.
No. He condemns Hamas's attack. He'll never condemn Hamas.
But let me ask you,
He condemns Hamas attack, but he won't condemn Hamas itself. Mohammed Hijab is a coward for condemning Hamas to begin with. But that's not enough. That's never enough. That's why you don't condemn. Even if you're not willing to support a liberation struggle by all and every means, even then, condemning is insufficient. It will never suffice for these people. It's not enough to condemn the actions of Hamas. You have to condemn Hamas and every grandmother of a Hamas fighter and their pets. If they have any cats, you have to condemn them too. Like, it's never enough.
You condemn Hamas.
On what basis?
Here we go. See?
You accept now.
Let me ask you a question.
Every answer is on what basis? What's your question?
Even if you ask me, if you can.
Every answer is on a complicated situation isn't a yes or no. It's a complicated answer. I wonder why.
IDF, I'll say specify context. In what exactly do I...
You defend Hamas as a terrorist organization that just went and killed 1,200 people, burned them alive, beheaded them, and took 250 hostages. Do you condemn them or not? Get your head into the debate, and do you condemn them or not? See, this is a debate.
It's 2-1 now. It's 2-1. It's become 2-1.
You're not a victim. Stop the victim, but now it's 2-1. Stop the victim.
So when he plays the victim, when he makes Israel look like a tiny speck surrounded by an Arab horde, when he says, I won't be bullied by a bully, when he's like, look at me, I'm not afraid, I'm not shaking. He's not the victim. He's not portraying himself as a victim, right? But now that he's first of all, it was 2-on-1 earlier with the whole fucking Churchill thing. Because Piers Morgan loves Churchill.
You love portraying yourself as a strong man. Now you're a victim. It's 2-on-1. You probably could take 2-on-1. So answer it. Answer the question. Is Hamas a terror organization you condemn?
Is that something you
Is Hamas a terror organization that you
It's a reasonable.
Jesus fucking Christ. Did you hear that? That's just, come on, bro. Like,
You're not a victim. Stop the victim, but now it's 2-on-1. Stop the victim. You love portraying yourself as a strong man. Now you're a victim. It's 2-on-1. You probably could take 2-on-1. So answer it. Answer the question. Is Hamas a terror organization you condemn?
Is that something
Is Hamas a terror organization that you?
It's a reasonable question because you.
he says, is that something you and your daughter say? Could probably take 2-on-1. Yo, bro, if homie can talk shit, that is clear. It's easy to talk shit to old people, though, to be fair. But homie can talk shit. Saying, oh, you and your daughter, is that what you guys saying? You could take 2-on-1? And he smirks, he smiles, like he knows, like, fuck, I just roasted the shit out of this food. Look at But that's what I mean. Like, yes, that's funny. That's great. For the homies, that's amazing. That's a great roast. He knows it. He couldn't help himself. But this is the lack of discipline. This is a lack of composure. Why? Why is it a lack of discipline? Why is it a lack of composure? Because you're not there for yourself. You're not there for your brand. If you were this was just randomly just you versus this guy, had nothing to do with Palestinians, you weren't there representing them, sure. Go as low as you want, do all the fucking wild comments you want. 2-on-1, oh, is that what you and your daughter say? Like, yo, like, homie, who are you speaking for right now? Who are you there for right now? Because it seems like you're only there for yourself. You're not. It doesn't sound like you're there representing Palestinians. But you're having a good fucking time, aren't you? You know your fucking YouTube subscription is gonna go up. You know your viewership is gonna go up. You know your platform is gonna get larger. You know you're gonna get invited to more of these spaces, if not invited again to Piers Morgan, because you're willing to play the game. You're willing to entertain. You're willing to be part of the circus. You're no longer just inviting. You're no longer a guest to the circus and watching the show. Trying to bring some, sense of reality, normalcy into the circus. Now you are part of the circus. You are a fucking clown. A dancing monkey at this point. That's disappointing. That is disgusting. That is unforgivable.
Terror organization that you.
It's a reasonable question because you asked me, is the IDF a terror
Okay, beautiful. I'll answer your question directly. Hamas is as much a terrorist organization. Yeah, no, Hamas shouldn't be called a terror organization if the IDF isn't. Why? Because if it's either both or neither.
Okay, but just to extrapolate your position, because you believe the IDF is, then you're also saying that Hamas is.
Let me take my position.
Say it.
Let me get the answer.
The unholy Shmoli won't let me speak.
Right, I'm asking you a question.
My answer is the first one.
Given you've already stated you believe the IDF is a terror organization.
Yeah.
Am I to assume that you believe? Hang on. Am I to assume that you believe Hamas is now?
This is my position. But you have to give me 10 seconds at least to answer.
Well, I think he is wrong. Not just denouncing, but for calling Hamas a terrorist organization. No. They're a liberation force. They're fighting to decolonize Palestine from Israeli settler colonialism. They're not terrorists. But he gives a great fucking analysis of the word terrorism and the way that these Westerners, these colonizers, use it.
Right? Legally, I think you shouldn't call Hamas a terrorist organization if you're not calling IDF terrorist organization. That's my position.
But you do
Hold on, let me finish. Because as we said, the UN definition of what a terrorist organization is to kill civilians in order to achieve a political objective. However, on a moral and theological, philosophical level, I agree with Rosalind Higgins, who was the justice of the International Criminal Court, right? The Court of Justice, ICJ, a British justice, by the way, she's a Holocaust survivor as well. She was Jewish, and her position is that she believes that the word terrorism or terrorist is actually useless. And she says that it's. I'm putting to her.
Can you answer my question? He's going on to question.
Let me finish. I'm answering your question. So I'm saying that as a moral construct, I think it's a neo-colonial social construct used by people in order to label some people as terrorists and others as well. So as a moral category, I don't designate it as a moral category. As a legal category.
Do you believe? You personally?
Do you see that? Embrace that aspect of it. No, I will not call them terrorists because that's the way that you, white supremacists, settler colonialists, proponents, defenders, advocates vilify any resistance, anyone willing to take a stance against you and willing to implement the same violence that you implemented against us to you in self-defense.
Mohammed, do you believe that the IDF and Hamas are both terror organizations?
I think yes. If you say yes to IDF, you should say yes to Hamas.
So
If
yes.
you say no to IDF,
What you believe.
If you say yes to IDF, you can say yes to Hamas.
I'm asking you what you believe.
Yes, I believe legally, according to the definition. If you say yes to Hamas, you can say yes to IDF.
Piers, we can go on to the next.
If you say no to the
We're going to the next block. But that's interesting.
But morally, I don't believe the category has any weight.
No, but you
have no designation.
But you have made your position clear, which is that you believe they're both terror organizations.
I believe that according to the law, absolutely.
Okay, and that's interesting to me.
Coward. Fucking coward. The IDF is inherently a terrorist organization because it's a settled colonial force whose objective is the subjugation, the oppression, the extermination, the eradication of the indigenous population. What is Hamas? What is any resistance force in Gaza? What is their objective? To rid themselves of the colonial oppressors. In this case, Zionists. Inherently a defensive force. Why do you think the IDF took the name? Israeli Defense Force. Because of the propaganda war. They're inherently making themselves the victim, despite being the colonizer.
Okay,
I have to say,
wait, let's come to
we
the
call the IDF a terror organization. The IDF keeps 1.8 million Arabs alive in Israel. Hamas, this is invention. It's a fabrication.
Let me move on to the last
Get more pictures out. It's unbelievable. This is how you lose the debate. My son.
He says, I brought nothing with me, but he brought the his little map.
My son is in the IDF. You're here in the safety of the studio talking about how you want to do martyrdom. You're really risking your life here. You big talk. You talk a lot. You attack Ben Shapiro's wife. You actually posted a clip saying that with someone else saying that it's not teaching you how to get women to listen to their husbands. This is all false bravado, false machismo. If you're a real man, go to the Middle East and fight. What are you doing in a television studio?
Let me move to the last one.
You should be there. You have the right to fight.
No, I'm not. You try to bully people in debates and it's being allowed in this.
I want to move to the last ironically themed.
So this guy's son is in the IDF. I wonder if he has a cushy job. Something like a Hela Klein. Just a pencil pusher. Because when you got connections like that, you're not actually engaging. You're not out there. I hope he is. I hope he is.
Okay, so I just want to say that this man is...
No, is peace possible? Ever possible?
I've got a minute uninterrupted.
Is peace ever possible?
Can I speak uninterrupted?
You're speaking about the subject.
I can say what he's been attacking me.
Don't attack it personally. We're not going to use it. It's pointless. I'm going to take it just for the record. We'll put it on YouTube so people can see it all in context, right? But on my show, I'm just not going to have half of this, what I thought was going to be a serious debate, taken up with YouTube personally abusing each other.
I don't know if Piers Morgan actually thought it was going to be a serious debate or whether this is what he wanted because this is what's going to generate most clicks. But I will say this. He was asked, the question was, road to peace. Can there be peace? And instead of answering the question, Mohammed Hijab is too focused on getting his lick back on Rabbi Shmuley. Rabbi Shmuley is not the enemy. He is a tool, a weapon, an agent of Zionism. But what is being combated, what is being opposed is Zionism itself, the ideology. The settler colonial project of Zionism. But he's getting distracted, his ego is bruised, and he wants to win a debate. That's why he's behaving like this.
Excuse me, Von Bismarck said, I repay people with the currency that they pay me with. Right. If he's going to come with that homonyms, as you've acknowledged, I can come back.
Right, but you did. You shouldn't have done. You had the high moral ground. On the personal stuff, you're as bad as each other. Let's start again. You get a minute. From now, is peace ever possible? Go.
justice is a prerequisite for peace. In South Africa, when the apartheid system, which we know for a fact Israel is an apartheid state because it has laws like the right of return, which only allow Jewish people to come into the country, and if they convert, by the way, to Christianity or to Islam, they are stripped from that right, which is it meets completely the definition of apartheid as per Cornell Law School and according to the UN Convention 1973. It's an apartheid system, and as a prerequisite of an apartheid system, you have to be a racist. If you support that, you're a racist. No doubt about it. So number one, 1973 apartheid law. If the black South Africans have been displaced, if they've been displaced by the whites, and then they were trying to come back into the country and they were not allowed, then you ask them if peace possible. That's not the question we'd be asking them. We'd be asking them is justice possible, and that's the question that we're going to be asking, because he can sit there and talk about all these things where the IDF, his son Mendy, is being attacked by, vibrated by the rockets, and he's selling him in the store saying vibrators for public.
Again, literally everything before bringing out vibrators was great. Not perfect, but great. The composure, your tone of voice, everything. The presentation, the delivery was perfect. But he cannot, his ego is too big to be put aside and not represent himself, not portray himself, not get these fucking debate points, these shit talking points, these roasting points. No. He cannot be there solely speaking for the Palestinian people. The arrogance, the ego, fucking disgraceful.
Unnecessary thing at the end again.
I hope you keep that in.
Rabbi Shmuley, 1 minute on is peace ever possible?
You see how he says, I hope you keep that in? Because this Rabbi Shmuley is a Zionist propagandist. So he knows how bad Mohammed Hijab is screwing himself over, how bad he's letting down the Palestinians in this propaganda war.
Of course, I revere countries like United Arab Emirates, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, where I've spoken several times. I am safer as a Jew wearing a yarmulke in Dubai and Abu Dhabi than I am on the campus of Columbia University or even Harvard these days. Mohammed bin Zayed is just an incredible leader. I saw in the Gulf states the Islam that Mohammed Hijab rejects, but the Islamic world embraces. That's why they make peace with Israel. It's a technologically advanced, tolerant, forward-looking, very traditional, very religious Islam, and that's why they make peace with Israel, and peace will continue to be made. All of these countries are praying for Israel to destroy Hamas because Mohammed Hijab is an outlier. He's an extremist, and his views, as he represents them at Speaker's Corner of things about women being such. Okay, let me just be clear. All of the Arab countries want Hamas destroyed, and the proof is when they had their conference in Riyadh last week, they did not even once call to bring in any evacuees because they want Israel to establish a more democratic regime in Gaza, which we're able to do. Israel's winning this war.
Y'all hear that earlier though? Look what he says.
For Israel to destroy Hamas.
Is peace ever possible?
Of course, I revere countries like United Arab Emirates, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, where I've spoken.
Dubai, Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates.
Several times. I am safer as a Jew wearing a yarmulke in Dubai and Abu Dhabi than I am on the campus of Columbia University or even Harvard these days. The Mohammed bin Zayed is just an incredible leader. I saw in the Gulf states the Islam that Mohammed Hijab rejects, but the Islamic world embraces. That's why they make peace with Israel. It's a technologically advanced, tolerant, forward-looking, very traditional, very religious Islam, and that's why they make peace with Israel, and peace will continue to be made.
And that's why they make peace with Israel, because of all these advances, because they're civilized, right? He feels safer there on a campus than a college campus. That's interesting. That's wild. Let's see why it is that these Arab countries embrace Zionists. This is from Strategy for Liberation of Palestine, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Let's see here. The millionaires of the Arab world, including merchants, bankers, feudal lords, owners of large estates, kings, emirates, sheiks, have in fact acquired their millions by virtue of their cooperation with world capitalism. They have amassed this wealth because they are commercial agents for goods produced by foreign capital or secondary shareholders in foreign banking establishments or insurance companies, or they are sheiks, emirs, and kings at the head of regimes that defend and protect colonial interests and strike at any mass movement aiming at freeing our economy from this exploitative influence. Consequently, they cannot keep their millions unless our land remains a market for foreign goods and foreign investment, and unless the colonialist, continues to plunder our oil and other resources, because this is the only way that enables them to acquire and keep their millions. This means that in a real liberation battle waged by the masses to destroy imperialist influence in our homeland, Arab reaction cannot but be on the side of its own interest, the continuation of which depends on the persistence of imperialism, and consequently cannot side with the masses. These Arab reactionary forces, particularly the intelligent ones, may outwardly support superficial national movements with the object of using them to settle, to their own advantage, some of their side conflicts with Israel or with world imperialism, but in the end, they are inevitably against any national liberation movement that aims at uprooting colonialism from our soil and building an independent economy that will serve the interests of the masses instead of going into the pockets of the few representing this reactionary force. The growth of the revolutionary mass movement means, in relation to these forces, the growth of the people's authority that act to destroy the authority of these forces. Therefore, whatever degree their conflicts with Israel and imperialism attain, they are at all times conscious of the fact that their main conflict is with the movement of the masses which seek the complete destruction of their interests and authority. The classification of Arab reaction as one of the forces of the enemy is of the utmost importance, because failure to recognize this fact means failure to have a clear view before us. So that's what he's talking about. The millionaires of the Arab world, these fucking sellouts. Oh, that looks crazy. That's who he's bragging about. That's who he feels comfortable with. The fucking sellouts, the capitalist class, all those, the elites, those that have abandoned and betrayed the Palestinian struggle.
No, I'll tell you. If two-state solution is a Hamas state wanting to eviscerate Israel, he doesn't believe in it. But he doesn't believe in a two-state solution. He believes in a final solution. No, really scares you. You don't believe in a two-state solution. You believe in a final solution. When you speak about Jews, you believe in a final solution. No, I'll tell you. If the history of the world, no two democracies ever fought war. We have a democracy in Gaza.
So what does peace look like in 20 years?
Peace looks like the Arabs voting for their rulers, voting and backing them, seeing Israel as a partner, not being humiliated that because of the tiny little red dot surrounds them, that's humiliation.
Always David, the David complex. I'm telling you. He says, do you believe in a two-state solution? He doesn't, so he has to find a way around answering it. Muhammad Hijab. There you go. Now you can clown the homie, bro. Now you can clown him. This is what I'm saying. If you just would have kept your composure, checked your ego, Rabbi Shmuley, people like him, the longer they speak, the more they fucking just expose themselves. Ask the right questions, provide the right pushback, and they'll lay it up for you.
I'll tell you. If two-state solution is a Hamas state wanting to eviscerate Israel, he doesn't believe in it. But he doesn't believe in a two-state solution. He believes in a final solution. That's really scary. You don't believe in a two-state solution. You believe in a final solution.
The way that he avoided answering the question is this slogan: you don't believe the two-state solution, final solution. That's it. If Muhammad Hijab just would have stayed quiet and let this motherfucker just wrap the rope around himself, I think Pierce doubles down on the question, though.
The way you speak about Jews, do you believe in a final solution and it's
Do you believe in a two-state solution?
If that second state is Mexico and Canada, yeah. If that second state is Gaza, then of course not, because it'll just be.
If that second state is Mexico or Canada, like, what the fuck does that even mean?
Another genocidal enemy wanting to wipe Israel off the map.
That's pretty unequivocal. He doesn't really want the two.
No, I'll tell you. If two-state solution is a Hamas state wanting to eviscerate Israel, but he doesn't believe in a two-state solution. He believes in a final solution. That's really scary. You don't believe in a two-state solution. You believe in a final solution. The way you speak about Jews, do you believe in a final solution and it's scary.
Do you believe in a two-state solution?
If that second state is Mexico and Canada, yeah. If that second state is Gaza, then of course not, because it'll just become another genocidal enemy wanting to wipe Israel off the map.
That's pretty unequivocal.
So you see, for them, the only solution that they have is eradicating Gaza, because he says it himself. If Gaza continues to exist, it will produce more threats to Israel.
He doesn't really want the two-state solution.
I want a two-state solution. That's a terrorist state to destroy.
I personally believe this whole question should be left to the Palestinians and what kind of solution they want. However, having said that, this man has written in his book, A War in Israel, that is the settlement. It's called the Israel Warrior.
Thank you. Thanks for plugging it.
Fantastic. Fantastic. In that book, he writes that the issue of settlements that me and you both condemn, Piers.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, we do. He doesn't condemn it because he sees an ancient biblical reason to be in that whole land.
I think Arabs and Israelis should be able to live wherever they want. I want Arabs to live in Jerusalem. I want Arabs to live in Tel Aviv. I want Jews to live there. I don't believe in a unified Israel. I don't believe in Arab. I am so proud that Israel has 1.8 million Arab Muslim citizens who are protected by the IDF. He calls the IDF a terrorist. They are defending Muslim lives.
What you should be less proud of is the rapid expansion of these settlements on the West Bank. It's been incredibly divisive.
You see, if he just would have been focused on predominantly exposing what an extremist, a Zionist Rabbi Shmuley is. Look, it took 41 minutes to ask him whether or not he condemns, the settlements in the West Bank. A very liberal thing to denounce. Somebody like Piers Morgan can denounce it publicly. 41 minutes to really put Rabbi Shmuley in the hot seat.
In my view, illegal. It's been declared illegal. It shouldn't have happened.
Human rights.
There are many things I'll defend Israel about. That is indefensible.
Let me answer. If you go to places in Judea and Samaria in the West Bank, like the biblical land, why do you call something Arabia? So the Arabs, you don't know history. It was always Judea and Samaria. The West Bank is the West Bank of the river. You don't call California the West Bank of Mississippi.
You see, holy fuck. You already brought it up. That this guy is a Zionist extremist, referring to things in a biblical sense, this magical fucking Torah description of what the world was, allegedly. Bring it up once, highlight it, so you come back to it when you make your own review of this, whenever you want to expose him as a Zionist extremist. But let him wrap himself around. Let him hang himself. Look at him.
Let me go back. If you go to the Barkhan Industrial Park in Judea and Samaria, you will see, I've met the Palestinians, I've interviewed them. They are paid 20 times the salary working for people you call settlers. They want them there. It brings civilization. It's only jihadis. It's only jihadis. And that's why
that's
they're saying, yes, it is. I've interviewed them myself.
Many Palestinians who definitely do not want to.
Let me answer. If you go to places
look what he says. Look what this fucking pig says. Look.
In Judea and Samaria in the West Bank. Because those are biblical lands. Why do you call something Arabia? So the Arabs West Bank is the West Bank of the river. You don't call California the West Bank of Mississippi. Let me go back. If you go to the Barkhan Industrial Park in Judea and Samaria, you will see, I've met the Palestinians, I've interviewed them. They are paid 20 times the salary working for people you call settlers. They want.
So immediately, the payouts. The same way that the original Zionists came and bought up the land with the purpose of colonizing Palestine. They weren't just buying homes to live in. They weren't just buying land to become part, of the community there. No, they were buying land with the intended purpose of pushing out the penniless, as Theodore Herzl planned, pushing out the penniless, the Palestinian peasantry, out to the other neighboring Arab countries in order to colonize Palestine. So it's always about you have to look as well the class dynamics of it. These European Zionists were always financially more secure than the Palestinian indigenous population. But look what he says.
Want them there. It brings civilization. It's only jihadis. It's only
It brings civilization. Why is this important? Well, let's look at the 100 Years War on Palestine. By Rashid Khalidi. Hope I pronounced that right. And look what Herzl has to say, right? In this situation here, in his defense, the Aryans. Herzl was being questioned about essentially the European Zionist plan in Palestine. Here's what he says. Okay. For context, I should read a little bit more than highlighted. Oh, perfect. Here we go. Look. Most revealing, the letter addresses a consideration that Yusuf Dia had not even raised. Quote, you see another difficulty, Excellency, in the existence of the non-Jewish population in Palestine, but who would think of sending them away? End quote. With this assurance, in response to al-Khalidi's unasked question, Herzl alluded to the desire recorded in his diary to quote-unquote spirit the country's poor population discreetly, quote-unquote, across the borders. It is clear from this chilling quotation that Herzl grasped the importance of quote-unquote disappearing the native population of Palestine in order for Zionism to succeed. Moreover, the 1901 charter that he co-drafted for the Jewish Ottoman Land Company includes the same principles of the removal of the inhabitants of the Palestine to quote-unquote other provinces and territories of the Ottoman Empire, end quote. Although Herzl stressed in his writings that his project was based on quote the highest, end quote, tolerance with full rights for all. What was meant was no more than toleration of any minorities that might remain after the rest had been removed elsewhere. So there again, we go back and seeing like the reason why these invaders, these quote unquote settlers in the West Bank are able to afford, to quote unquote like pay, as Rabbi Shmuley was saying, these Palestinian Arab workers, right? More. What do you say? You say some ridiculous shit like 20 times more. Is because of this. Because that's been the project from the start. To use capital to your advantage. Herzl underestimated his correspondent. From al-Khalidi's letter, it is clear that he understood perfectly well that at issue was not the immigration of a limited, quote, number of Jews, end quote, to Palestine, but rather the transformation of the entire land into a Jewish state. And this is the issue with them being able to buy up land, is they weren't just trying to live there, they were trying to colonize it. First financially, and then once they were established enough, through force. Continues. Given Herzl's reply to him, Yusuf Dia could only have come to one of two conclusions. Either the Zionist leader meant to deceive him by concealing the true aims of the Zionist movement, or Herzl simply did not see Yusuf Dia and the Arabs of Palestine as worthy of being taken seriously. Instead, with the smug self-assurance so common to the 19th century Europeans, Herzl offered the preposterous inducement that the colonization and ultimately the usurpation of their land by strangers would benefit the people of that country. That is crazy, right? Like, this is for your own good, this is for your own benefit. We'll just wrap up this section here. Herzl's thinking and his reply to Yusuf Dia appear to have been based on the assumption that the Arabs could ultimately be bribed or fooled into ignoring what the Zionist movement actually intended for Palestine. This condescending attitude towards the intelligence, not to speak of the rights of the Arab population of Palestine, was to be serially repeated by Zionists, British, European, and American leaders in the decades that followed, down to the present day. As for the Jewish state that was ultimately created by the movement Herzl founded, as Yusuf Dia foresaw, there was to be room there for only one people, the Jewish people. Others would indeed be, quote unquote, spirited away, or at best tolerated. And then we go down to this section. Characteristically, European colonizers seek to supplant or dominate indigenous peoples, whether in the Americas, Africa, Asia, or Australia, or in Ireland, have always described them in pejorative terms. Here's where you got to pay attention. They also always claim that they will leave the native population better off as a result of their rule. The quote unquote civilizing and quote unquote progressive nature of their colonial project serves to justify whatever enormities are perpetrated against the indigenous people to fulfill their objective. So again, they also always claim that they will leave the native population better off as a result of their rule. The civilization and progressive nature of their colonial project serves to justify whatever enormities are perpetrated against the indigenous population to fulfill their objectives. And that's exactly what Rabbi Shmuley was trying to brag about. Hear what he had to say.
So the West Bank, Mississippi. Let me go back. If you go to the Barkhan Industrial Park in Judea and Samaria, you will see, I've met the Palestinians, I've interviewed them. They are paid 20 times the salary working for people you call settlers. They want them there. It brings civilization. It's only jihadis.
They bring civilization. You only have to do a little bit of research, and you start seeing through the Zionists and what they really are: colonizers. Colonizers that weaponize Judaism the same way that the Spanish weaponized Christianity, specifically Catholicism, in the same way that the Protestants weaponized Protestantism or fucking Christianity as well, right? It's so frustrating because it's so simple. It's just colonization. It's just Europeans do what Europeans do. Invading, killing, conquering, unable to live peacefully and in equal with those indigenous people, because these motherfuckers have a God complex. Doesn't matter what religion. They think they have the right to all the land on the planet, no matter who's living on there. Let's leave it there. There's more shit, but it's not even worth it. Here we go. All right. I know we read a little bit of it, right now, highlighting the Arab reactionaries, the sellouts, literally. Let's see what we can do here. I just don't remember whether or not, or at least what part we did last time. I should have wrote it. Should have done a lot. Let's see something real quick. I wonder where I stopped last time. Let's pull it up. I think I just stopped prior, or just did the introduction. Yeah, I think we're good here. All right, yeah. Solid. All right, well, let's continue the reading. It's taking a lot longer than I had planned. I only wanted to do like 3 parts of this, but it's fucking late. Yeah, we're good. Okay. What section are we on here? Founding document of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, 11 December 1967. People of the Arab nation, people of Palestine. 50 years ago, the masses of our people faced a continuing series of assault by Zionism and colonialism upon the people of this nation and our right to liberty and life. 50 years later, and the global forces of Zionism and imperialism continue concocting plots, attacks, and wars in order to establish the idea of an entity of the State of Israel. On each day of this historic era, the masses of people are struggling against each of these schemes. We have seen throughout the years in the life of our Palestinian people a continuation of this struggle through upheavals and uprisings, crystallizing in the last period in commando work, practiced by the vanguard of the people on the ground with full refusal of submission, surrender, and compromise, and other serious forms and methods of political action. This advance has also represented an determination of the masses, represented the determination of the masses of the Palestinian people to take the initiative to pave a road to full emancipation, which is simultaneously the responsibility of the entire Arab masses. Our struggling people, the military defeat suffered by the Arab armies, served as the beginning of a new phase of work in which the revolutionary masses must take their responsible leadership role in confronting the forces and weapons of imperialism and Zionism, which history has proved is the most effective weapon to crush all forms of colonial aggression and to give the initiative to the popular masses to formulate the future according to their will and interests. The only weapon left to the masses in order to restore history and progress and truly defeat enemies and potential enemies in the long run is revolutionary violence. In confronting Zionist violence and reaction, there is no other option in front of the masses of the Arab nation. They face a fierce enemy who wants them to surrender unconditionally. This is why you cannot denounce Hamas or any resistance. This is why you cannot compromise with Zionists, because they want only unconditional surrender. It's what any settler colonial project has ever demanded or willing to accept. It continues. The hopes and anticipation of the Arab masses have reached a qualitatively new level from before the 5th of June. They are aware of the nature of the stage, and the objective conditions have matured to the extent that allows us to raise the slogan of the popular armed struggle and put it into practice until victory in a long and protracted battle, a victory that must be achieved through the will and aspiration of the masses. The entire masses of our Palestinian people live today for the first time since the catastrophe of 1948, the Nakba, on a completely occupied Palestinian territory, confronting a rapacious enemy face to face, and we now must take up this challenge to its conclusion, or we must accept or surrender to the ambition of the enemy and the daily humiliation of our people and absorbed fortunes of our lives. The displacement and dispersion of the last 20 years have created a circumstance in which we must confront the Zionist invaders, the fate of our people, and our cause, and every human being in Palestine relies upon our Palestinian determination to fight the invaders in order to preserve our dignity and our land and our rights. You see that? It's either surrender or resist. It's not complicated. Just as a situation, right? Understanding the colonization process imposed on Palestine by the Zionists, the solution in itself is not complicated as the Palestinians see it. Resistance or submission. Palestinian people displaced in the camps of displacement and isolation, tillers of our inflamed land, O poor steadfast in our cities and villages, in the camps of misery, through your valor and resistance in confronting the enemy, one slogan is paramount and repeated daily. Only armed resistance, and there is no life for us on our occupied land except the life of popular armed struggle in the service of our objectives and the daily battle. The armed resistance is the only effective method that must be used by the popular masses in dealing with the Zionist enemy and all of its interests and its presence. The masses are the authority, the guide, and the resistant leadership from which victory will be achieved in the end. It's not just taking control, right? It's not just demanding the masses, the proletariat, the colonized, follow the strategy. But it's telling them it's your responsibility to lead it. It is necessary to recruit the popular masses and mobilize them as active participants and leaders, something that can only be achieved through systematic organization addressing the armed struggle of the forces of the masses, creating a heightened awareness of the full dimensions of the battle and the stages, and continuous recruitment of manpower for the armed organization, building the revolutionary leadership in order to become more able to exercise resistance and continue despite all the difficulties and obstacles. Fucking A, it's about organization. It's about recruitment. It's about the continuation of that recruitment in order to build leadership, right? Therefore, in order to unite the forces and energies of the Palestinian masses in the occupied land, we have held a full meeting between the following Palestinian organizations: the Heroes of Return, the Palestinian Liberation Front Squads, Organization of Martyr Abdul Latif Sharu, Organization of the Martyr Khwazam, Organization of the Martyr Abdul Qadir al Husseini, the National Front for the Liberation of Palestine, Youth Organization for Vengeance, and several other Palestinian groups on the homeland. And we see this today. Seen some beautiful photos of, I'm telling you, from the PFLP to Hamas, like all these. This is why it's so frustrating and infuriating when all these fucking liberals claim to denounce Hamas in the October 7th attacks. We're just Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. The collective, united Palestinian Liberation Force. These organizations have agreed among themselves to unite under the banner of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, achieving a faithful unity among these forces, realizing that the nature and dimensions of the battle and the hostile forces require us to cluster all efforts and revolutionary ranks for our long and bitter struggle against our enemies. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, initiated and directed by a core group of revolutionaries, is at the same time open to all forces and Palestinian groups to meet in a broad national revolutionary front in order to achieve a national unity established between all factions engaged in armed struggle. They ain't talking about fucking engage in peaceful protest. The unity of all the freedom fighters is a real demand for our people, as the battle is long and cruel and rapture is intolerable in the ranks of the national movement, and therefore the Popular Front is dedicated entirely to this requirement because it has formed on this basis. But you have fucking leftists here, anarchists out here, liberals out here, say no, we equally have to denounce Hamas as we do the IDF. Today, our masses are marching through the doors of armed struggle, and we believe that the masses' leadership in the armed struggle, bearing its standard as the only guarantee for the steadfast of the struggle, and its escalation up to the level of the Palestinian Revolution with all its dimensions and content, are fighting people. The only language that the enemy understands is the language of revolutionary violence. One more time for you spineless fucks. The only language that the enemy understands is the language of revolutionary violence. The armed struggle is the main curriculum for our protracted conflict that we are waging against occupation and against attempts to liquidate our struggle through attempts at settlement, which have begun again in some areas of the Arab homeland and impose a totally unacceptable occupation upon some parts of our Arab land. We are fighting against the enemy in every land where the feet of his soldiers march. This is our historical approach, where we are going until we reach the stage where we open a wider front against the enemy and turn our land into a burning hell for the invaders. The crossfire of armed struggle is not known to have limits, and the armed resistance should not be confined to the militants, but also embrace all parts and sectors of Palestinian resistance against the enemy at every level, dealing with the enemy militarily, but also a total boycott of all economic, civil, and political institutions of the enemy, and a rejection of all ties. The economic battle. That's what we say. Boycott Starbucks, boycott Disney, boycott McDonald's, right? Like BDS is a legitimate force. There's a reason why Israel has been attacking it for decades. And why Norm Finkelstein is a fucking coward for attacking them. But he said it himself, he's not an enemy of Israel. All right. The slogan of our masses must be resistance until victory, rooted in the heart, with our feet planted on the ground, in deep commitment to our land. Today, the Popular Front is hailing our masses with this call. This is the appeal. We must repeat it every day through every breakthrough, bullet, and the fall of each martyr, that the land of Palestine today belongs to all the masses. Every area of our land belongs to our masses who have defended it against the presence of the usurper. Every piece of land, every rock and stone, our masses will not abandon 1 inch of them, because they belong to the legions of the poor and the hungry and displaced persons. In order to liberate this land, and for our steadfast people, our fighters today fall with their heads lifted. Holy fuck. Repeat that shit every fucking morning and tell me tell me your fucking appreciation for life and everything you have won't change. What your commitment to being a true ally won't be reinforced. The masses, O sons of our heroic people, are the life breath of the fighters, and it is the involvement of the masses in the battle that ensures victory in the long run. The popular support for the militants at all levels in every land, from the basis for genuine, firm, and escalating struggle and steadfastness, rising until we crush the enemy. In this war for our occupied land and the faith of collaborators and traitors and enemies of the people will be the faith of the occupying enemy, crushed in full. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine is determined to reject delay and hesitation in engaging in the struggle in our occupied land, and declares its determination to reject humility and humiliation and settlements. We stand today before our masses, our people, promising to provide them with the truth, the whole truth, in every respect regarding our struggle, achievements, and obstacles facing our armed action. The truth must be the property of the masses, because there is no other force more committed to their own interests. The masses must be fully aware of the achievements and the problems of armed struggle without exaggeration or hype, because they are the custodians of the objectives of this struggle and their aspiration, which will be given to this struggle, including every possession up to their blood. The active members, the fighters on the Palestinian land today, pursue a new path of political action and deal with the masses with full openness and truth. The truth. The ugly and the good, right? No false promises. No false bravado. Just the truth. There will be a long and grueling struggle. The sacrifices will be made. But that victory will be achieved. And even before that, rejecting humility, rejecting humiliation, and rejecting settlements. You cannot compromise with colonizers. People of the Arab nation, this battle is long and harsh, and the armed resistance today is the vanguard of fighting along the steadfast Arab front. Every Arab demands today to provide full support for the march of the armed combat corps at all levels. The Palestinian fighting masses on the occupied land are actors of the Arab Revolutionary March against imperialism and its proxy forces. In our response to the Zionist alliance and colonialism, we must make the organic link between the struggle of the Palestinian people and the struggle of the masses of the Arab people, facing the same risk and the same schemes, and therefore the work of the Palestinian armed struggle determines the position of the Arabs who stand by the struggle against those who stand against it. But you see, there is no between. There is no middle ground in this fight against Zionism and colonialization. And that's why you see, while the leadership of these Arab countries are spineless in attempting to align with capital to secure their comfort, their positions of power, the people themselves understand this. Understand that the work of the Palestinian armed struggle determines the position of the Arabs who stand by the struggle against those who stand against it. The struggle of the Palestinian people is linked with the struggle of the forces of revolution and progress in the world. The format of the coalition that we face requires corresponding governing coalitions, including all the forces of anti-imperialism in every part of the world. Because it's a global struggle for liberation, a global struggle against colonization, a global struggle against capitalism. Our struggling masses everywhere on Palestinian land, fellow workers and peasants, all poor people and refugees, fellow students, clerks, and traders, this is the beginning of a movement of the people flying the flags of sacrifice, steadfastness, and challenge. We are on the ground, and we promise that armed struggle is not a rosy dream, but more fighting, led by the political mobilization of the masses to defend the defenseless against reprisal and persecution. We are marching each fighting step today, preparing to fight a long, harsh, and bitter battle with your leadership and commitment as the true owners of the cause. That battle is not easy nor quick, but it is the battle of destiny. And its presence requires our deep commitment, ability to continue, and steadfastness. Glory to the steadfast of our Arab nation. Glory to the struggle of our people. Long live the unity of our fighters on the land of Palestine. We will surely win. If you're if your favorite self-proclaimed leftist streamer isn't engaging with this material, because the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, they're a Marxist-Leninist organization. So while they denounce Hamas because Hamas are, Islamic radicals, they're quote-unquote terrorists, right? Well, here we have a Marxist-Leninist organization, one that might be more suiting to your needs, to your liking, to your moral compass. But they won't engage with this either, because you read it. They're honest about it. The revolutionary struggle is an armed struggle. And they can't have that. They want you to be good little victims. It's liberals will just look at this, will skim through it, and just a bunch of tankies. Yeah, a bunch of authoritarians. because they're cowards. But this shit's inspiring as fuck. This has been some of the best like writings that I've ever engaged with. You know, my favorite text is Maria Sinson, Jose Maria Sinson. And it's I got it from foreign language press as well. But you can find all this stuff online. But I don't want to butcher the name. I know it's the basic Basic Principles of Marxism Leninism, a primer by Jose Maria Sison, who was a revolutionary Filipino fighter. He wrote the text while imprisoned. And the thing is, like, I don't call myself a Marxist. I call myself a student of socialism. But what I will call myself, without hesitation, is an anti-imperialist decolonialist. Meaning I'm against empires and I'm against colonization. Whatever method, strategy, ideology will achieve, the dismantling of empires and the end of colonization, I will study. And when I see Marxist Leninism in the hands of colonized people, it is inspiring and terrifying because you realize and you read about the responsibilities. The studying you must do, the discipline you must have, the commitment that you need, that is required. No fucking excuses. Engage with the material, please. I appreciate y'all. Hasta la próxima. Buenas noches. Good night, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're at. Just do the work.